Being thrown out of the Windsor estate, the police have arrested Andrew Mountbatten Windsor. It's an extraordinary revelation and development on this story involving the Epstein files and all the allegations that have been swirling around about Andrew over the many years, from Virginia Giuffre, now sadly deceased, and since then, and certainly what's been contained in the Epstein files as released in the last few weeks. But the police have arrived at Sandringham Estate this morning, where Andrew has made his new home. It's his 66th birthday today. What a birthday present that is. He has been arrested by the police. Of course, the brother of the current king, the second son of our late Queen Elizabeth. This is an extraordinary development. Those of us who've been talking an awful lot about establishment cover-ups and lack of, should we say, interest by the police in what are very, very serious allegations against Andrew. Perhaps pleased that that pressure has finally been put on the police, and they have done the job of actually looking into these issues seriously. Must bear in mind, of course, that the Prince has not been charged with any crime at this point, and he has always denied any wrongdoing in relation to any of the allegations about him. We'll give you more on that. We'll talk to you about that throughout the show, but I'm just being told that the arrest has been on suspicion of misconduct in public office. This, of course, relates to those Epstein file allegations and the documents that, if they are true, would suggest that he had, it is alleged, passed on basically what was confidential government information when he was the UK trade envoy for this country for 10 years to Jeffrey Epstein for Jeffrey Epstein's financial gain.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Royal arrest. MP, Parliament should decide if Andy and Mandy have committed treason. Parliament should investigate Andrew Mountbatten-Windsor and Peter Mandelson for treason, a senior MP has demanded. Ex-Security Minister Tom Tugendhat, you can leave your Tugendhat on. Tom Tugendhat has called for a special committee to probe Andrew and Lord Mandelson's links to Jeffrey Epstein. It would be made up of MPs, peers and retired judges who would have the power to summon witnesses and demand documents. Now, folks, as you know, I have the seeing eye. And I'll tell you what I've noticed in the last couple of days. Do you know who's been very busy of late, Dave Rhodes? Gordon Brown. Do you remember that loser? That unedifying political fool? That political hot mess, that dumpster fire of a former Prime Minister, Gordon Brown? He was the thorn in the side of Tony Blair for many years. Now, Tony Blair did a lot of rubbish things, including the Iraq War and opening the border to Eastern Europe. Of course he did. Plus the constitutional and legislative framework that he created for the country that's made it impossible for us to deport criminals from this country from overseas. So, look, I'm never going to defend Blair's legacy, but Brown was far worse for his short stint in power. Do you remember after the election that he lost, he wouldn't leave? Do you remember that, Phil? He was just sort of holed up at number 10. Anyway, he's been very busy pouring a bucket of the Brown stuff over old Andrew Mountbatten-Windsor. Oh, I think maybe Mr. Mountbatten-Windsor was using RAF jets. I think he was taking money. I think he was this. I think he was that. Why is Gordon Brown colluding with the authorities to take down Andrew Mountbatten-Windsor? Why is Gordon Brown so focused on the prince formerly known as Andrew? Well, I'll tell you for why at 6:09 on a Sunday morning. Well done for being up. Get the kettle on. Curtains open. Let's do this. Gordon Brown brought Peter Mandelson back into frontline politics. So Gordon Brown is distracting here. Gordon Brown is worried about his legacy and his reputation. Gordon Brown is worried that there is a political scandal that's bubbling away that is going to implicate him. So what does he do? Like every cynical politician, he distracts. And he decides that he'll throw Andrew Mountbatten-Windsor under the bus. Andrew Mountbatten-Windsor, a man who cannot defend himself because the royals don't go around. I mean, obviously Harry does because he's a fool. He's no longer a royal, really. But official members of the royal family, they do not go around suing people for libel. So he's a soft target. I mean, that's the reason why the Americans have got away with this. You've got the likes of Bill Gates, maybe Trump, definitely Clinton, who have questions to answer about Epstein. But no, it's all Andrew. And now the British political establishment on the left are focused on Andrew too, because they are so worried about Mandelson. And it was Brown that brought him back in that last awful administration, that fag end couple of years under Gordon Brown as Prime Minister, when he put taxes up and we began our horrific downward journey into socialism. So I'm not having it. There's this characterisation of Gordon Brown as this deeply honourable and principled man. No, not at all. A very cynical man, a very manipulative man. And like I said, there's no love lost between myself and Tony Blair, but he made Blair's life a misery for a decade because he wanted the top job. It wasn't the national interest. It wasn't even the Labour Party interest. It was all about Gordon. And now he goes after Andrew Mountbatten-Windsor because he's the guy that brought Peter Mandelson back into the political front line, having been forced to resign in disgrace from the cabinet twice. Gordon's idea, let's bring him back. And by the way, why did he bring him back? Gordon Brown doesn't like Peter Mandelson. They're not ideological bedfellows because Gordon Brown is much more left-wing than Peter Mandelson. And Peter Mandelson was Tony Blair's main man. So Mandelson was very much Team Tony. Gordon Brown did not like Lord Mandelson, but brought him back as a failing Prime Minister because he was desperate. Because love him or hate him, Peter Mandelson is a political impresario. He's a political wizard. He's a political maestro. I don't like him. But this was the architect of New Labour. He's the guy that steered Tony Blair to 3 election victories. So what a hypocrite Brown is. And please spare me the I'm a good and honourable man. You tanked the economy, Gordon Brown, and we're still paying the price. Is it time, do you think? Phil, Dave, do I need to get off the fence? I think the problem with the opening part of this show is you don't really know what I think. I'm hiding behind a mask of neutrality. All right, let's get on, because I've got more front pages, and I'm so excited about my studio guest. And my studio guest is a man who has been very close to Nigel Paul Farage. My studio guest is a man who knows Farage, Dave Rhodes, better than he knows himself. What we've got here is a Farage Insider live on the show in just a few minutes' time. And we're going to be talking about the fact that old Farage is marooned on an ocean as we speak. I'm actually, for poetic license, I'm exaggerating, Dave. But what's happened is Farage has done the right thing, which is he's supported 4 British Chagossians in their journey back to their homeland. And he's very supportive, and he's right to do that. And I understand that he and Reform have helped to get these 4 people over to one of the uninhabited Chagos Islands where they've set up camp. Of course, we spoke to the acting First Minister on Talk Breakfast this week, which went viral, and we're very proud of that. Another Talk exclusive. Can I just say, if you're listening to this show and you're watching it, I want to thank you and I want to congratulate you, because what you've done is you've backed a winner. You've backed a winner in Talk. And what is our ambition? It's simple, to be number 1. And thanks to you, we're getting there. Another exclusive this week. That's how we do it. We spoke up for the Chagos Islands. It makes no sense to hand away militarily significant, strategically important British sovereign land to a country in Mauritius that, people don't realise this, Mauritius have never owned the Chagos Islands. Maldives have got a greater say. Maldives have a claim. They're close by. Mauritius, forget about it. It's an anomaly. We're going to pay them $35 billion over 100 years to hand British sovereignty away. It makes no sense. The Americans don't want it. The Chinese do. Is that not a red flag? Anyhow, so Farage isn't happy, and he's doing the right thing. I don't know if I'm allowed to say this on the radio. Old Farage, love him or hate him, he's got a pair of balls, hasn't he? Is that compliant, Phil Dave, executive producer? Phil's been in radio for 57 years. Yes, he said we'll let it slip once. And Dave just said dump. Now, I don't know if... Are you referring to the output, or is that a call of nature? Folks, family show, behave yourselves. We've all had a drink. Look, can I just say that it's very important that Farage has gone to this archipelago, which is one of the worst words the world has ever heard. He's gone there and he's supporting these 4 people. And the British authorities, Phil Dave, won't let him onto the Chagos Islands. They won't let the effective leader of the opposition onto the Chagos Islands. A guy who's way ahead in the polls. He'll likely be our next Prime Minister. 4.5 million people voted for him in July of 2024. And he can't get onto, wait for it, British territory. A British politician, a leading British politician, number 2 to only Keir Starmer in terms of significance politically. Forget about Kemi, I like her a lot. Forget it. Phil Davey, forget it. Zach Polanski, what a joke. So Farage can't get... He's British, Farage, and if you know that. And a British politician cannot get onto British land, which is the Chagos Islands. If only they were so good at policing another set of islands called the British Isles. Can you imagine, Phil Dave, if the authorities were as assiduous at keeping people off these islands that shouldn't be here? But no. Their focus is stopping respected and liked British politicians like Nigel Paul Farage from going onto British land. I mean, am I living in a parallel universe? Is this an episode of Black Mirror? What is going on? What is going on? Anyway, so Farage has been thwarted and he's now on his way back to the United Kingdom. You couldn't make it up. A couple more front pages before I bring in our Farage Insider. Sunday Times, Met police officers told to guard Epstein dinner party. I've got to say, we're going to talk about Andrew today, but we're not going to focus on it because I'm more worried about inflation, youth unemployment, open borders and the cost of net zero and wokery in our public institutions. I'm more worried about an NHS that doesn't know what a woman is. Is it encouraging that our health service, which is there to keep us on the planet, doesn't know the difference between a lady and a gentleman? Is that a red flag for you? With leaflets about birthing humans from our NHS. We paid for those leaflets. Chest feeder. If you're a female listening, and we have a colossal number of women that listen to and watch the show, can I ask you how you feel when you read an NHS leaflet that calls you a chest feeder or a birthing human? How does that make you feel? And if you're an older lady that's watching or listening, how does it make you feel that your health service that you pay for with your taxes doesn't mention women in a leaflet about the menopause? It just says people with the menopause. People with cervixes. I'd love to know how they make you feel. That's what we're going to talk about today. We will, of course, do an hourly hit on Andrew because it's a big story, but it's not my focus. Lobbyist targeted another journalist. The lobbyist who examined the personal, political and religious background of a Sunday Times journalist attempted to investigate another reporter as recently as last week. NATO chiefs rebel on defence cash. Britain's top NATO officials have warned the government that uncertainty about defence spending and the speed of rearmament risks undermining the country's status as a leading member of the military alliance. You see, this is why I'm so passionate about the economy. I want to bring taxes down because then what happens is companies invest and they hire people, so that's less welfare. And then you have national income because those companies that have invested and expanded, they pay their taxes. And then that goes into the treasury. So you reduce the taxes, you have national income. And with national income, you can have more doctors and nurses, more teachers, you can repair schools, you can, quite simply, have more police officers, and most importantly, you can invest in our military. So really, with Rachel from Accounts, the economy is not just human pain via debt and inflation and unemployment, which is horrific. It's danger as well. Rachel from Accounts is dangerous because her growth-sapping policies mean that we can't have a military, so we're actually unsafe. And I agree with those NATO chiefs, well done them. I don't normally agree with these sort of globalist figures that sit on panels in Switzerland, but on this occasion, I'll give them that. Number 10 ethics unit broke into safe. I mean, what a sentence! The Cabinet Office's propriety and ethics team broke into a safe and destroyed the department's copy of a bullying investigation into the new head of the civil service. In 2022, Darren Tierney, the then Director General of the Government Standards Watchdog, asked maintenance staff to force open the vault. He later said that he'd wanted access to a confidential report about Dame Antonia Romeo, who Sir Keir Starmer appointed as a cabinet secretary last week. Now, I can't call her a wrong-un. I'm not able to. But I will tell you that she faced allegations relating to her use of expenses and treatment of staff with alleged bullying while posted to New York in 2017. What this woman brings is bad headlines, and she's Starmer's great hope. You couldn't make it up. Would it be not possible, Phil, we're going to get to the break in a second, to have a head of the civil service that isn't dogged by shocking headlines and horrible rumours about her conduct? Could we not just get someone called Jim, who's good at his job and who's a nice guy and hasn't faced bullying allegations or allegations of misappropriation of funds? This is amazing. The Labour Ethics Unit breaks into a safe. Just that's a delicious sentence. Do you know something? I'd love to do more front pages, but my guest is too good. So we've got a break. We'll get him straight in. 6:21. What a thrill to have you with me. This is Talk Breakfast.
Breaking news in the last couple of moments. Extraordinary news. The police have arrested Andrew Mountbatten Windsor. It's his 66th birthday today. What a birthday present that is.
Mr. Mandarin, how long do you think that you can stay on the island?
We're going to stay forever. Our rights have to be respected now. We're going to stay.
Do you expect Jeremy Clarkson to become a part of your new party?
I can tell you, if Jeremy Clarkson decided to darken my doorstep, I would be absolutely delighted.
across the UK. On DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
You're listening to Talk Breakfast, 6:23, a very, very busy show to come. Dolan's Dispatch is a pretty spicy one this morning. It's my reaction to Nigel Farage unveiling his top team for government. My question to you this morning is a simple one, which is, are Reform UK now Britain's only hope? I don't know anyone that thinks Nigel Farage is perfect by any stretch. But is that the roll of the dice we need to save this country? Let me know. 0344 499 1000. I'll get to your thoughts on that very shortly. But with me live in the studio, I'm delighted to welcome broadcaster, author and bon viveur, Duncan Barks.
How are you?
Listen, I'm so well.
Yeah.
You know Farage very well. A breaking story this morning, if you're just joining us at 6:24. Nigel Farage has helped 4 British Chagossians to go back to their homeland, and he's been in that territory himself, marooned in the ocean, trying to get onto one of the Chagos Islands. The British authorities won't let him, and he's been forced to fly back to the UK. The reason why he's relented is because he doesn't want to stop aid and medical supplies getting to the 4 Chagossians that are on that territory. Nigel Farage and you go back a little bit, don't you?
Yeah, so he was... there was a period in my life when I wasn't broadcasting or working on the radio, and I ended up working in the field of public affairs, or rather public relations. And I took a job as a director of a communications agency in West Sussex, and Nigel was a client. Now, this was back in 2010, so it's a good few years ago.
UKIP?
He was the MEP for the southeast of England for UKIP. He wasn't a leader at the time of UKIP. That was a guy called Lord Pearson of Rannoch, who was leader. Nigel was an MEP for the southeast, and he was a client. And I don't think I'm giving too much away by saying that what would happen. So UKIP didn't really have a robust press organisation. You know, there was a couple of people in the room, and they were very good, but sometimes they needed some support. So the agency that I was part of provided that support, but not to the party, but to Nigel as an MEP. And what would happen, and I don't think I'm giving too much away, sometimes the Bucks Herald would say we'd like a piece about why Nigel thinks the EU is not good for Britain, and Nigel would pick up the phone and go, any chance you could write it? And I'd go, yeah, well, I'll send you the invoice, but yeah. So it's all of that. So, so I've known him since 2010. You can find some awful pictures online of me looking even fatter than I am now.
I don't think so. To me, it's all muscle.
You're very kind.
What you've got is you've got a natural sort of rugby player's athletic build.
A natural ruddy complexion.
So and are you referencing that rather iconic photograph?
Yeah. So
tell us about that. Describe it, because it's quite significant.
Yeah, there was there's several photographs. So as part of the business that I did with Nigel, there was an election in 2010. And he stood in Buckingham, which at the time was the seat of John Bercow, who was Speaker of the House of Commons. So parliamentary protocol dictates no one ever stands against whoever the Speaker is.
Right.
All right. So Nigel quite rightly thought, I can get a bit of media attention here. I'm going to stand against John Bercow in Buckingham. And he paid the agency that I was part of for me to get some press there, because he was going to do this stunt in a plane that was going to tow a banner saying vote UKIP or something. Was it?
And did it have a reference to the pound at all, that banner?
Don't think so.
No. Phil Dave, whilst you're there, obviously you've got a while because we're on air for 3.5 hours, but do you think you could find the picture of Nigel escaping a plane crash, because it's got Duncan in the photo?
Yeah.
I mean, I think one day that will be put to like a sort of watercolour image, and it'll be in the National Portrait Gallery.
Maybe there is one of the pictures where a friend of mine offered to get it blown up and framed, and I said, I think that's a bit distasteful, but there is this picture of the plane wreck in the background and Nigel looking...
Well, what we'll do is we've got so many people that watch the show now, so what we'll do is maybe before 7, if you can, Phil, we'll flash that up, or even just after 7. So what's happened is a big publicity stunt. Farage goes up in a plane, and that plane's going to have a banner saying vote UKIP. Yeah, and do you want the whole story? Yeah, I don't mind chatting it through with you and viewers and listeners to talk. I mean, there was for a time. The reason I want the whole story is because I think he's going to be our next Prime Minister.
Yeah.
And I think that's why it's relevant.
I completely get it. And there was a time I wouldn't talk about it because there were some nasty consequences of what happened, you know, including, well, we'll get to the pilot in a second, who we couldn't release from the plane wreck, which was awful.
Devastating.
So, this stunt was going to happen. It was, you've got to put this in context. This was, it wasn't even an airfield. It was literally a strip of concrete in a field somewhere where this plane was. So it's the kind of the kind of location. If you imagine, you know, sometimes people do charity parachute jumps and stuff. It's like that. There was nothing there apart from literally a shed and a windsock. Okay, that was it.
Was it legal? I mean, was it above board?
Oh, all above board. It was all pucker. So I'd driven up to Buckingham the night before because we were getting out of bed very early in the morning to do this thing. And my job purely was to meet any of the press who were going to be there taking pictures. And that was my job, to get the press there. And I mentioned the kind of airfield it was, a very small airfield, literally in the middle of nowhere. And I went up the night before, stayed in a hotel in Buckingham, had some cracking bangers and mash, a couple of glasses of red wine, small little glass of whiskey, went to bed because I had to be up early the next day. Nigel picked me up from the hotel and we drove in his car to this airfield. Now, this was just over the border in Northamptonshire. And that's where the pilot was, with the plane and the banner laid out on the tarmac.
Yeah.
And, I managed to get one press photographer there because it was in the middle of nowhere and it was a guy from a press agency. So I considered that I earned my keep that day. And my job was to say hello to the bloke and make sure he got the pictures that he wanted. And for those who are listening and watching Talk this morning, a press agency means there's someone there, they take a load of pictures and they go out all over the wires so newspapers can go, oh, we'll have that picture or whatever for the stunt. So, you know, it's good having someone there, a snapper from a press agency. And then this plane, and again, to put it in people's minds, I mean, think of a milk float.
Yes.
With wings and a tail fin, but that's about it. It's not a big plane. It's a very, you know, and a room in the cockpit for two guys, quite cramped. So one was the pilot, the other was Farage. And press photographer took loads of pictures and stuff, and I was, you know, standing there feeling a bit like a spare part.
But so far, so good. A good publicity stunt.
So far, so good, you know. And yeah, so the plane took off, and what it had to do is kind of, if I remember this correctly, had to pick up the banner. So the plane goes off, and then he does a low swoop and then picks up the banner. And speeding things up a little bit, the plane was in the air. They picked up the banner, but very quickly, the banner started to wrap itself around the tail fin of the plane.
Oh, dear.
So and we had no radio contact at all, but I was getting these messages from the plane from Nigel, just texting, just going, where's the banner? Can you see the banner?
Oh, dear.
And I'm like, well, I can see the banner, but it doesn't look great. And then very quickly things started to go wrong because it meant the pilot couldn't properly steer the plane, navigate the plane in any direction, so they had to make a crash landing.
This is terrifying.
Yeah.
And actually, Nigel was quite badly injured, wasn't he?
He was. So the plane, there were a couple of things I remember. The plane came down quite quickly, and obviously the pilot was trying to land it as best as possible.
The plane hadn't sort of ceased to function or hadn't blown up. It was just like a rough emergency landing, would you say?
You couldn't steer the plane, right?
No.
So you know, he tried to get it down on the runway, but it was a crash landing.
Yeah.
It crash landed, and for those watching, if you imagine, hang on a sec, let me see if I can do this. If you imagine that this is the kind of runway here, right? The plane came down, bounced, and then split into two.
Crumbs.
And what happened is most of the fuel tank went in one direction.
Which is good news.
Very good news. And then the rest of the fuselage went in another direction.
It's not in any way fanciful to think that Nigel Farage could have been killed.
No, he could have died. No question about it.
And if that were the case, the course of British history will be quite different.
Absolutely.
I mean, that is a sliding doors moment for the country, is it not?
Completely. So we had that going on. And
you're there. Are you actually on... where are you at that point?
I'm on the airfield.
And
this is about...
What are your emotions as you're watching a plane crash on the ground?
Shock. It was about a third of a mile away from where I was with the press photographer. Okay, remember, I got a lift there with Farage in his car. Me and the press photographer, we kind of looked at each other. He was taking some pictures, which is his job. I said, we've got to go over there. So we got in his car, which I remember was a Fiat Uno. Right. I'm a big bloke. I don't fit well in a Fiat Uno.
Compact device.
We got over there. The place smelt of aviation fuel.
Of course.
We could hear murmuring, people in pain, crying, not screaming. I don't know where that came from. The plane was upside down, remember. The fuselage was upside down, and Farage was hanging upside down, restrained by his, I guess, his seatbelt, his harness. The press photographer was still taking pictures. And I was like, mate, you're gonna have to help me here. And to be fair, after 30 seconds, he said, right, let me just get my pictures and I'll help you. And we managed to, with the help of a farm labourer who'd been cycling a bit beyond the way, who'd cycled over, and you can see those pictures as well, we managed to release Farage from the plane. So he was hanging upside down, right?
My goodness.
And he'd lost, it's amazing what you remember, he'd lost one of his shoes. My mum, who's no longer alive, used to be a nurse, and she used to tell me about, you know, how you make sure people's legs aren't broken and stuff like that. So I was gently tapping his foot to make, could you feel this, Nige? Can you feel it? So yeah, I can feel it. And literally, we released the harness, and he kind of, like, me and this other fella just caught him. And he was battered, he was bruised. The pilot we couldn't release. The pilot was stuck, and it turned out that he was partly stuck behind one of the exhaust pipes of the plane. And he was screaming in agony because, of course, the exhaust pipe was hot and he was getting burns on his torso.
Oh, my goodness gracious me.
So that was going on, and by which point, somewhere along the way, I dialed 999, as you would. So this must have been when we were driving in the photographer's car to this spot. And I remember, and this, I'm going to have to choose my words carefully. You might have to use the dump button, just in case I forget. This person was going, and where are you? I was going, I have no idea where I am. What's the postcode? I'm like, I have no idea where the effing postcode is. Leave me alone. And, you know, it was just like, well, we're going to have to try and locate you. I said, all I know, it's an airfield somewhere over the Buckinghamshire and Northamptonshire border, which was enough. By which point, anyway, so after we released Nigel and stuff, the emergency services started to turn up.
Pretty devastating, I will say, and what a sliding doors moment for the country. A plane crash that nearly killed Nigel Farage, and Duncan Barks there on the scene, and with Farage in that iconic photo as the two of them are escaping the wreckage. And the question now is, with Farage in one piece, is he the answer to Britain's problems? Is Reform UK Britain's only hope? I will tell you at 6:35 that I've had messages you can't hear the show on YouTube. Now, Engineer Dave, we have fixed it. That's been resolved. We're delighted to have you listening on the radio and on TV. If you want to watch the output, head to YouTube and search Talk. Reform UK, are they Britain's only hope? That's next.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Sunday Telegraph, Brown calls for police to probe Andrew's use of jets. Gordon Brown has demanded a police investigation into whether Andrew Mountbatten Windsor used taxpayer-funded jets and RAF bases to meet up with paedophile Jeffrey Epstein. Now, I've been very clear, as I said in my 6 a.m. newspaper review, that the reason why Gordon Brown is so focused on Andrew Mountbatten Windsor and pouring a bucket of the Brown stuff over him is because he is absolutely culpable for the Mandelson scandal, because Gordon Brown is the guy that brought Mandelson back, having left the cabinet twice in disgrace under Tony Blair. And so now Gordon Brown is looking over his shoulder. He was a terrible Prime Minister. I think he's the biggest loser, Gordon Brown. I'm not having it, this honourable, deeply one. No, they crashed the economy. The first Chancellor in history to borrow money during a period of economic growth. He was an awful Chancellor who absolutely precipitated, alongside the Americans, the financial crash in 2008. And he brought Mandelson back. This whole thing stinks, and many of you agree. Let's have a look at this. First of all, good morning, gents. Alex in Belfast here. Gordon Brown also had a breakfast meeting with Jeffrey Epstein. It's a deflection. He is very cynical in trying to destroy Andrew. Focus on Lord Mandelson instead. Chris says, good morning, Mark. You're spot on about Gordon Brown. Surely Mandelson should meet the same investigation as Andrew, the same charges as well. Andrew is now the smokescreen. Let's hope that Mandelson isn't forgotten in the Andrew... let's hope that Mandelson is not forgotten in the Andrew meltdown. That's Chris in West Sussex. You're right about the whole Andrew thing, says Roy in Gloucester. This is just one massive distraction from what's really going on in the country at the moment. I bet Starmer is loving all of this focus on Andrew. Listen, folks, I'll get to more of your messages very shortly. I'm going to get to some other stories, but I've got to ask you, it's today's question. Nigel Farage is not perfect by any stretch, but is Reform UK now Britain's only hope? Duncan Barks.
I think as it stands, possibly. Listen, I think there's quite a complex... I'm going to have to give a complex answer to this question because I don't think it's a simple answer. Kemi Badenoch has done great work over the last 3 or 4 months in kind of proving that she is the right leader for the Conservative Party. But here's the challenge. I'm old enough, because I'm an old git, to remember when William Hague was at the dispatch box tearing strips off the government at the time.
He won Prime Minister's questions every single week.
Absolutely. And you can draw, I think, a parallel with what he was doing and what Kemi Badenoch has been doing over the last 3 or 4 months. She's been brilliant at the dispatch box. She's been, giving Starmer a kicking and Reeves a kicking and doing the job of leader of the opposition really, really well.
Yeah.
But is that enough to actually break out of the political world and become relevant once again to the man and woman in Doncaster or Runcorn or Durham or Truro or whatever? And I'm not entirely sure it is. And I think when it comes to the Conservatives, there is a challenge here. It's going to be time is going to be the great healer before people go, we're going to give you another shot. I drink in a pub in Chichester called the Eastgate, right? And there's a guy in there who's a builder. I'm not going to name him. He might be listening. Hello, mate. And, we occasionally talk about politics from time to time. And, and there's a sense I get from people that they've kind of gone, well, we had the Tories for 14 years. It wasn't great. The last 18 months of Labour have been appalling. Let's give someone else a shot. And that's not necessarily to say Reform are not getting support because people don't support their policies. But it suggests that there is a mindset which exists, which is, do you know what? Someone else deserves a go. So I think you've got that going on in terms of support for Reform that makes up a chunk of their support, alongside probably 15 to 20% of people who go, Farage is the man to become Prime Minister. Just going back to the Conservatives thing, I think it really is problematic for them. As I say, it's a case of time needing to be the great healer, because whatever Kemi does, it's not going to be enough, because you're also going to get, rightly so, people in Reform just going, yeah, but you had your opportunities over the last 14 years when you were in government. And how do you fix that? How do you turn that around?
Well, I think it's interesting, isn't it? Because Starmer's a terrible Prime Minister, but the biggest problem is the backbenchers behind him, who are more left-wing than their own government.
Yeah.
Starmer, I'm not a fan. I think that's on record. But I will always give credit where it's due. And he tried to do the right thing with welfare benefits.
He tried.
And particularly in relation to the scope and scale of people receiving disability benefits. And this is not about saying you're in a wheelchair, you're getting nothing. It was not like that at all. It was about the rather exploitative end of so-called disability, which of course now you just have to have a mild headache or a gloomy day and you're disabled. So, the government did the right thing, seeking to claw that back. And by the way, this was trivial numbers. It's about 5 billion, and thwarted by his backbenchers. And the issue is Kemi, I think, has the same thing. And I think Robert Jenrick is not lying when he says he defects to Reform, and he said, listen, mate, half those Tories don't want to leave the ECHR.
Yeah, I think you're onto something there. The point I would also make is, and I think Reform, look, Farage is a genius campaigner, genius politician, right?
Where's the butt coming?
No, there's no but. The most influential politician of the 21st
Duncan's
century.
wobbling on the line here. Look at him. He's sweating like Prince Andrew at a Pizza Express.
Outrageous comment. Yeah. So the point I was going to make is I think Farage is a great campaigner. He's taken Reform to new heights. They're leading in the polls. I mean, hundreds of polls now put Reform out in front.
Yeah.
I think they need to be a little bit careful, because I'm picking this up from what I call normal voters, not people who work in media or politics.
Yeah.
That there is a bit of a sense of like, Nige, don't take any more Conservatives on, people who used to be in the Conservative Party, because that's not why we like you. We see Reform as a breath of fresh air, maybe an insurgent political party, so you just need to be careful with welcoming too many Conservatives into the fold. And I'm picking that up from people who are not necessarily politically engaged, but a bit nervous about the fact that there is a bit of a narrative developing that Reform could become the Conservatives 2.0.
Well, exactly. And I've got messages coming in thick and fast. Sharon says, good morning, Mark and Duncan. I think Nigel is amazing. He'll make an amazing PM. He knows what the British people want. He'll listen to us and do what we want too. And similarly, we've got another message. Joanna in Salisbury. Oh, my goodness, Mark. I've just seen the Nigel plane photos. I'm amazed anyone walked out of that. The jungle must have been a wheeze after that stunt went wrong. And good morning, Mark, says Yvonne in Somerset. People must get behind Reform or pay the terrible price of another Labour government, which could include the madness of the Greens. Barry says, Mark and Duncan, Reform are the UK's last chance, regardless of Restore and Advance, of course, rival right-wing parties.
Can I make a comment on that? I mean, there is something going on there with this potential split on the right of the political spectrum in this country, where you have Reform Britain under Rupert Lowe, Advance UK under Ben Habib, who appear on social media to be having this bizarre kind of like, join my party. No, you join my party. It's all a bit weird. But the thing is, there is a real threat that there might be a fragmentation of the political right in this country.
Yeah.
And my biggest fear is, and I've always said this, I've been very clear about this when I write for newspapers or broadcast here on Talk or whatever, is that the thing we cannot allow to happen is for another term of a socialist government in 10 Downing Street. Now, whether or not that's Labour getting another majority back, or they get in again with a coalition of the Greens and possibly the Lib Dems, this country, I mean, I feel this country is almost on the cliff edge, right?
It's 5 to midnight, isn't it?
That's what it feels like to me, 5 to midnight. If there's this ongoing split on the right of the political spectrum, which, let's be honest, when we talk about Rupert Lowe and Ben Habib, and I've interviewed them both, and I'm sure you have as well, there's some quite heavy-duty egos going on there, right? A lot of this is ego-driven. If that that split on the right of the political party, the political spectrum continues, there is a threat that the nearer we get to an election, we might end up with this kind of like socialist lefty coalition getting back into government. That's terrifying.
Well, that is the real worry. Now, I think you've got reservations about Farage because you feel that there's a risk, and you're not saying this, I don't want to put words in your mouth, but almost a sort of Corbyn element where here's a politician who likes to disrupt and likes to campaign and likes to protest rather than actually become Prime Minister. I tend to agree with your analysis. I think you don't feel that Farage was sort of, has basically craved number 10 for his political career.
I'll give you a very clear opinion on it. He's made his name and success to date by being a disruptor and a campaigner, which is brilliant. He has admitted himself that Reform UK lacks government experience. That's their Achilles heel, okay? Which is one of the arguments why you bring in people like Robert Jenrick and Suella Braverman, etc., etc. And I get that completely. I think the two challenges facing Reform at the moment is, he's doing great work with his Chagos stuff, okay? It's great. So in the newspapers today, his Chagos aid mission has been blocked effectively by the British government, okay? But that's still the behaviour of a campaigner, not necessarily a future Prime Minister. And I think there's floating voters out there who would love to back Reform UK, who just need to see a bit more of that kind of like yeah, he can be my next Prime Minister. And I also think the other challenge reform has is on the economy, because as we all know, the economy drives everything, right? It's so fundamental to the success of a country, and spending and various other related issues. They don't have necessarily at the moment a robust plan for the economy, which is why it was great to see Robert Jenrick announced as the Treasury spokesperson. I won't use the term shadow cabinet because technically that's not right, but as a Treasury spokesperson, and that's great. He has got a lot of work to do now to say to people, this is our plan, and bring people on side. And I think once that starts to happen, some of these floating voters, which are out there, will go, I'm voting reform.
Well, exactly, and I mean, I don't disagree with you about the lack of experience that most of the reform key figures, Tice, Farage, and Zia Youssef have, of course, zero experience in government. So I don't disagree with that. I also don't think that Reform UK is internally democratic. It is the Nigel show. If he gets into number 10, it will be presidential, not prime ministerial, which is the theme of today's Dolan's dispatch. All of that is true, but I don't think it's a problem. And I'll tell you for why, because my viewers and listeners have told me consistently, if things get just 10% better under Farage, then I'll take that. And I think what will happen in government, he will be a diva. He will be short-tempered. It will be the Nigel show. There will be inexperience. There will be mistakes. But there are two things that will be different, is I think you'll have better policies and you will have political will to see them through. And that will be similar to the Trump administration. Trump's crazy. He says mad things. He's a lunatic. But overall, the policies have been good. And there has been political will to do it, such as closing the southern border. If Farage stops the boats, that's his legacy.
It's done.
And I think he'll achieve more than that.
I just wanted to pick up on your point. Do you still think there is this element of the Nigel show, despite having actually announced these people taking on these other positions?
I think it's total autocracy. And I think it will be a number 10, and he will be the first UK president. And I think there will be problems. I'm not dressing it up, Duncan Barks.
No.
I share every single one of your reservations about a Farage-led administration.
Well, to be fair, I haven't made reservations.
No, you haven't got No, you're being nuanced and cautious, which is not going to work on talk, OK? So you're fired. 6:50. Get out of here.
I'm gone.
I don't want complexity. No, I'm only pulling your leg. Go on. No, I share. Your view is nuanced. And I think that is for a lot of my viewers and listeners. They know Nigel is not perfect.
And I think there's a sense never been experienced before in this country where people are desperate for change, so desperate for something new and someone who tells it like it is. And Nigel will do that. There's no question about it.
Well, I think so. And I think my view, and as maybe not a million miles away from where you are, is my point is it will be a flawed project, a reform-led government, but the country's in the toilet. And I think it's time now for desperate measures. And that's my view. But what I want to know is, we'll continue this conversation, what do our viewers and listeners think? Are Reform UK the only hope? We're going to get to the break in just 1 second. Dean in East London says, good morning, Mark and Duncan. I fear what will happen if Reform gain office and turn out to be, I'm worried they will turn out to be another tentacle of the uni party. Another listener says Farage is a clapped out snake oil salesman with the biggest ego in politics. And why does Duncan not finish the full story on Nigel's plane crash? The pilot that survived lost his business, his family, everything because of the stunt. Oh, my goodness gracious. Colin's got some serious allegations there that I'm not able to back up. Apologies for that, Duncan.
I haven't finished the story because we went off in a different direction.
Well, exactly. We might pick up on that in the next part. No, that's it. Well, there's some serious allegations in that message that you'll understand I'm not able to share. Bill in Romsey, good morning, Mark and Duncan. If Reform gets 300 seats but not enough to govern on their own, would that be good for the country? A kind of best case scenario, a Tory Reform coalition. Listen, folks, so many more messages to come. More front pages. Are Reform UK Britain's only hope? Don't go anywhere.
breaking news in the last couple of moments. Extraordinary news. The police have arrested Andrew Mountbatten Windsor. It's his 66th birthday today. What a birthday present that is.
Mr. Mandarin, how long do you think that you can stay on the island?
We're going to stay forever. Our rights have to be respected now. We're going to stay.
Do you expect Jeremy Clarkson to become a part of your new party?
I can tell you, if Jeremy Clarkson decided to darken my doorstep, I would be absolutely delighted.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
So listen, folks, you're listening to Talk Breakfast, 6:54. You will not believe this story, courtesy of my executive producer, Phil Dave, and he's spitting with rage about this, and I share his concerns. An award-winning police detective who was one of the first on the scene at the London Bridge terror attacks is sacked for jokes in a private WhatsApp group. You will not believe this. This is a policing hero who's lost his job, a top detective, a very brave man that faced down actual terrorists. He's been fired for jokes on a private message group. We'll deal with that at 7 o'clock. It's going to be our lead story, and I'm going to get reaction from Mike Neville, who is a retired ex-detective, and the brilliant Duncan Barks, who joins me live in the studio. Howard says, Mark, you keep distracting Duncan off his point before he's finished and we don't get back to it again. It's very frustrating to listen like that. Well, shall we finish the story of Farage and the plane crash?
Yeah.
So there's a banner on the back of this plane.
Yeah.
2010?
Yes.
During the election.
May the 6th, I think.
Very sadly, the pilot entered a very dark space and is no longer with us. May God rest his soul. Farage escapes with injuries, which, by the way, I think we saw I'm a Celebrity, that he still got those injuries, that he has to work out every day and do lifting because of his back. Yeah. So he was quite seriously injured at the time. What do you think that crash may have done to his mentality?
Oh, without question. It made him stronger. There's no question about it. So I mean, we were talking earlier. I've known Nigel for a bit. You know, we've had beers and stuff in the past. His life is really, really interesting, I think, psychologically. So he, and this is all on the public record, he was involved in a very serious car accident at one point. He was walking across the road, got hit by a car, right? And he was in hospital for months and months and months.
Didn't know that.
He also had a health scare regarding cancer in the past when he was a younger man. So he survived that as well. So I think when you go through stuff like that, from a psychological point of view, it does make you stronger. And I think surviving the plane crash made him stronger and absolutely resolute, which is why you are seeing this man today who, at the moment, is looking like he will be the next person in Downing Street. He is absolutely resolute. And if you look what he achieved over Brexit, you know, that was such a significant thing. And I believe all of this is driven by this person who believes he was put on this planet to actually do something significant.
Well, with Brexit, he's achieved more than most British prime ministers that had a majority in the House of Commons, and he achieved it from outside of that building. Linda's not happy with me at all. Mark, you leave Nigel alone. He loves his country, and that's good enough for me. Mark, Reform are the only party that is truly conservative, says Richard. We have to give them a chance. And Matt says, until we have a serious politician who takes on Islam in this country, we're heading one way. We're losing our identity fast. Is there a danger that Reform UK becomes part of the Uni Party and that Farage is just another figure of the establishment?
Well, we had a message in from a listener and a viewer earlier talking about this Uni Party concern. I don't know what that means. I see people on social media talking about, oh, there's a risk Reform is going to be a, part of the Uni Party. I don't know what drives that. Do you?
Well, I think there's just a concern that Farage is somebody that creates the illusion of being a disruptor, but actually he'll fall in line with, high levels of immigration, that he'll row back on net zero. I think the reason people are afraid is because they voted for Boris Johnson in 2019 as the great disruptor, and he folded, didn't he, to the establishment. Sage, net zero, you name it. I mean, he's been the most left-wing prime minister for decades. Old Boris Johnson.
Shall I tell you what I think the biggest mistake has been? If you're the Conservative Party, the biggest mistake they made, where Nigel stood down a lot of candidates in the 2019 general election, right, What they should have done is put him in the House of Lords.
And thanked him.
And they didn't. And that's why the Conservative Party is where it is today.
It's wild. Colin says, good morning, Mark and Duncan. Reform are our last chance to regain our great country. We're on the brink of civil unrest if Labour gets in. I've got to tell you that. And what about this? Gordon Brown, so focused on Andrew Mountbatten Windsor. Why? Because he's the guy that brought Lord Mandelson back to frontline British politics. Barry wants me to read his whole message, and Barry, your wish is my command. The only reason I cut it in half is because of time, but let's do it. Barry says, good morning, Mark and Duncan. Reform are the UK's last chance, regardless of restore and advance. I was disgusted when Rupert Lowe said he would leave the country should the left be re-elected. That's no patriots abandoning those of us who could not afford to leave. And this from Bill. Mark, Tory prospects, voters' memories of the Tories pre-July 2024. 14 years of wasted opportunity, lies and disappointment. Colin, reform are our last chance to regain our great country. We are in trouble without them. And Deborah as well. She's all in with the Reform Project. Thank you for that, Deborah. Next up, a top cop, a hero, loses his job for jokes on WhatsApp. That's next.
Just breaking news in the last couple of moments. Extraordinary news. Not just that the police have arrived at the Sandringham estate where Prince Andrew, as was now Andrew Mountbatten Windsor, is currently living since being thrown out of the Windsor estate. The police have arrested Andrew Mountbatten Windsor. It's an extraordinary revelation and development on this story involving the Epstein files and all the allegations that have been swirling around about Andrew over the many years, from Virginia Giuffre, now sadly deceased, and since then, and certainly what's been contained in the Epstein files as released in the last few weeks. But the police have arrived at Sandringham estate this morning, where Andrew has made his new home. It's his 66th birthday today. What a birthday present that is. He has been arrested by the police. Of course, the brother of the current king, the second son of our late Queen Elizabeth. This is an extraordinary development. Those of us who've been talking an awful lot about establishment cover-ups and lack of, should we say, interest by the police in what are very, very serious allegations against Andrew. Perhaps pleased that that pressure has finally been put on the police, and they have done the job of actually looking into these issues seriously. Must bear in mind, of course, that the Prince has not been charged with any crime at this point, and he has always denied any wrongdoing in relation to any of the allegations about him. We'll give you more on that. We'll talk to you about that throughout the show, but I'm just being told that the arrest has been on suspicion of misconduct in public office. This, of course, relates to those Epstein file allegations and the documents that, if they are true, would suggest that he had, it is alleged, passed on basically what was confidential government information when he was the UK trade envoy for this country for 10 years to Jeffrey Epstein for Jeffrey Epstein's financial gain.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Three minutes past 7. Happy Sunday, one and all. Mark Dolan here for Talk Breakfast. Last in a marathon session here on Talk. I've been looking after breakfast Jeremy Kyle back on Monday, but thank you for your company, all the calls, the texts. We're going to go out with a bang. I've got a big show for you today. And breaking this morning, Nigel Farage stranded in the ocean as his efforts to bring aid and medical supplies to the 4 residents of the Chagos Islands are thwarted. The British authorities do not want Farage to land on this disputed territory, so he's been forced to fly back to the UK. Well, Farage is not happy. What say you? Can this hated deal to give away British lands at a cost of £35 billion be stopped? We've got the inside story. Meanwhile, Donald Trump snaps extra tariffs on the UK following the Supreme Court ruling this week on his flagship policy. Will this put more pressure on the British economy and provide a fresh new headache for Rachel from Accounts? Are we now in effective recession? Let me know your thoughts. Does it feel like we're in recession? And did Andrew Mountbatten Windsor use RAF jets to meet Jeffrey Epstein? We'll keep an eye on the Andrew story, but we're not focusing on it today. We're going to focus on inflation, which is a tax on everyone. We're going to focus on the boats, which is a national security, economic and humanitarian disaster. We're going to focus on the highest energy bills in the developed world. We're going to focus on the highest youth unemployment in the whole of Europe. We're going to focus on the problems facing this country. I make no apologies for doing that, which is why today's big question is a simple one. We know he's not perfect by any stretch, but is Nigel Farage now Britain's last hope? 0344 499 1000. Tommy's on the phones today. He's on great form, let me tell you. He's got a twinkle in his eye. He's had 3 coffees. He's ready to go. 0344 499 1000. Book your place on the show. The switchboard is already full. You can text the word talk and your message to 87222. Or leave us a voice note. We know you're busy, so you just call that number. Leave a message. It goes on the radio and it goes on the telly, because that's right, folks. You can hear us on DAB+, in-app and online. You can also watch the show. This is a TV programme with my amazing guests and Dolan's Dispatch at 9 o'clock. All you do is head to YouTube, search Talking Up, we pop. As the saying goes, let's talk. And let's do so in the company of 2 very good friends of mine, the esteemed broadcaster and talk star Duncan Barks. And down the line, I'm delighted to welcome Mike Neville, retired Scotland Yard Detective Chief Inspector. Gentlemen, lovely to have you with me in the studio. Lovely to have me here today. Mike, great to see you. Mike, I want to get to a couple of really big stories, including a policing scandal based around a private WhatsApp group message. But can I ask you, on a political front, we know he's not perfect by any stretch, but is Nigel Farage now Britain's only hope?
I think so, yes. I think it's sad that we're seeing all these splits on the centre right, with Rupert Lowe and then Ben Habib and other people setting up parties. I think the lesson learned, we cannot, if you look at the left with all the splits there, they're very good at uniting together. And I think that the centre right, we've got to unite together, come together to give this country some hope, because at the moment it looks like everything's broken, and we've got to move forward with a good leader like Nigel Farage, in my view.
Well, I just wonder, Duncan Barks, whether shares in Reform are actually underpriced. And we know that they're ahead in the polls, but many are saying not with a decisive lead that would give them a bumper majority. That said, what about the shy Reform supporters, the people that won't tell a woke graduate in a hoodie on the street that they're voting Reform?
There's a big chunk of people who are still in a place mentally where they would be reluctant, I believe, to wear their heart on their sleeve and say, I'm going to vote Reform. And I think what will happen ultimately is when we get a general election, there will be people who go into their polling station and they will put a cross in the box next to a Reform candidate. But at the moment, they don't feel, for whatever reason, that they can openly tell people they're supporting Reform. And it is interesting, you know, I mix in all kinds of circles and I try not to talk about politics. I make a joke which is like, you want to talk about politics? You need to pay me, right?
That's exactly right.
I do that for a living. you know. But sometimes down the pub or whatever, people, and I mentioned earlier, you know, I go drinking. I go to a couple of different places and I have a pint most evenings.
Can I support your? Can I salute you for your support for the hospitality industry?
I'm doing my best. I'm putting in the shift, the hard yards, I listen to people, and there are people who go. I've had conversations, and they don't know what I do for a living, really, and they don't know my background at all politically, and they all kind of go, do you know what, I know it might sound a bit weird, but I think reform is probably the answer. But they're putting in those kind of like, those little baby steps beforehand going, I know it might sound a bit. So I think there are quite a few people out there, and all of it, regardless of whether or not you're an out-and-out reform supporter or you're someone who is thinking, I'm going to vote reform, but I'm not going to tell my other half or whatever because I might be judged. All of it is driven by a sense of desperation. People are absolutely desperate for where they find themselves in this country today. And I think, you used a great term earlier when you and I were chatting, it feels like it's 5 minutes to midnight, right? And it feels like that. And I think a lot of people are looking around just going, do you know what? This has got to be the shot we all need to take.
And Mike Neville, I don't think people are expecting miracles from a Reform UK administration. I don't think the party is democratic, Mike. I think it's the Nigel show. It will be a presidential setup if he wins. But the bottom line is, I think two things will happen, Mike. You'll have better policies and you will have political will to execute them.
Yes, I agree. The political will is the big thing. You know, I'm a reform supporter, and there is that political will to do something like these small boats, sort that out, sort out crime. But what you have, though, is I think people realise that there's a huge blob, this swamp, as Trump would call it, of civil servants. And to be quite honest, it'd be better to get rid of them all rather than to try and work with them, because at every stage of this, just like people saw with Brexit, that there are people there ready to thwart democratic votes because of their left-wing political leaning. It's truly shocking. I think the public know that, but they want to change. They've seen 100-odd years of the same two parties switching sides, achieving nothing. No, they want something different. They want reform, literally.
And if I had £1 for every viewer and listener, Mike, that said, if things get 10% better, I'll take that.
Yeah, I suppose so, but I think people want 100% better. You know, this morning I'm going to go off and see my grandchildren. I want to know what kind of world I'm leaving for them. What kind of England am I leaving for them? We need to sort it out so the England that I love is the one that my grandchildren can enjoy.
Most definitely. Can I talk to you now about this extraordinary story at 11 minutes past 7 on Sunday morning, Mike, and it relates to an award-winning police detective, one of the first on the scene at the London Bridge terror attacks, sacked for jokes in a private WhatsApp group. Now, his remarks involved casual slang in relation to the travelling community. Mike Neville, Duncan Barks, it's not language that any of us would use. I wouldn't call it darkly racist. I think it was vernacular. It was a casual slang. And the guy's lost his job. What's your reaction?
Well, the intro to talk is all about common sense, isn't it?
Yeah.
And what happened to the sergeant telling somebody off, saying this is unacceptable, you shouldn't have done this?
Yeah.
And these things as well were done in private. These weren't done in public. It was done. So I imagine these have been found out because somebody else has done something wrong. They've delved into WhatsApp group and they've found these comments and they're judging this man. So what happened? No one's judged in the same proper way. So you have somebody who's a bit of a hero, has attended a really serious matter, a really serious crime, has done good work, and that you're not weighed in the balance. It's suddenly, these comments are racist, and the axe falls, and it's simply not good. Most of the public will not support this. Of course, Guardian readers will think it's the right thing to do. We've already got enough crime without getting rid of experienced detectives. In times past, the police, you face all sorts of horrible incidents. Officers, the police officers, firefighters, nurses and the like, they see thousands more traumatic things than your average member of the public. And some ways to deal with this is dark humour, and you would go into a pub and have a drink and say things that you didn't want anybody else to hear, but it was dealt with and your stress was relieved. Now people, foolishly I suppose, use these WhatsApp groups, and so it's recorded what they've said. But I go back to the point, a telling off deal with this guy, let him move on. But this is not the way in a woke Britain. They'd rather put somebody's head on a plate and say, look at us, we're very, very anti-racist. And they think that will improve trust and confidence in policing. It doesn't. The public just want officers to get on with it and solve crimes and make them feel safer. That's what's gone wrong.
And Duncan, the streets of Britain are now less safe in the absence of Detective Constable Mark Luca, who I'm going to call an unqualified hero, because this is a man, as part of British Transport Police, who rushed to the scene after 3 terrorists deliberately drove a van into pedestrians walking over London Bridge before fleeing to Borough Market and stabbing innocent bystanders. This guy gets the call. 8 people died, 48 gravely injured. And what does Mark Luca do? He gets in a cop car and speeds straight in that direction, straight to danger, and he's out of a job now because of off-colour language in a private messaging group.
This makes me sick, and I'll tell you why it makes me sick, because you know, you've just outlined brilliantly what this man did in the face of the unknown. Actually, he could have got shot. He could have been part of an explosion. This was back in 2017. The London Bridge attack, just over there, just literally a stone's throw from where we are here at Talk.
Correct.
Right, and we expect these people to protect us. We expect them to risk their lives for us, and we expect them to run towards trouble, not run away. And that's what this guy did. Now, I'm not going to make excuses for his language, but to sack him as a result of this is just utterly absurd. I mean, Mike brilliantly explained what could have been done. He's got some skin in the game, being obviously ex-plod, and that's great. I look at this as a member of the public, and it's just like, all right, he might have used some unsavoury language. I can't use the word I want to use. You give him an olicking. There you are. That's what you do.
Nicely put.
And then you crack on with it. He's had his card marked, and then you draw a line and you carry on. But now, because we live in a society that is so there's no formal nuance anymore. It's either one thing or another. It's like, you bad man, you must lose your job. That's it. It's gone. And we've lost, by what it looks like from his record so far, a great copper. And this is because the pendulum has swung too far in the other direction. You know, people use language, they use slang. It is inappropriate. It will upset some people. If it's persistent, then you can argue that it is a sackable offence. But I mean, in the case of this, and given this man's record, he shouldn't have lost his job.
Most definitely. And Mike, there's an aggravating factor, which is that this came from a private WhatsApp group. Is nothing sacred? I text some pretty edgy stuff to my friends and colleagues because that's the nature of a private message to friends.
Absolutely, and it's just there's no as I said, the key thing for me is there's no common sense. How long does it take to train up an officer who can have that much experience? As I say, in the past there would have been a sergeant gripping him, right, you can do some extra night shifts or something like that. There would have been some kind of punishment, but to take lose a man's job, it's just not. We've seen it. We saw that PC Lawn Castle, didn't we, in Dorset? Who was there was a public appeal for him. The senior police officers have lost touch with what the public wants, and this needs to be dragged back before trust and confidence in policing increases.
So, folks, listen, I've got to tell you, 7:16, one or two technical issues, but I'm fascinated by what Mike has had to say. Mike, can I draw your attention, and Duncan, to another story that's infuriating my viewers and listeners? What we're going to do, folks, we've got a minor technical issue, but I'm going to throw Gordon Brown under the bus next, because this terrible ex-Prime Minister is using Andrew Mountbatten Windsor for a political cover-up. I've got the inside story. We'll do all of that next.
breaking news in the last couple of moments. Extraordinary news. The police have arrested Andrew Mountbatten Windsor. It's his 66th birthday today. What a birthday present that is.
Mr. Mandarin, how long do you think that you can stay on the island?
We're going to stay forever. Our rights have to be respected now. We're going to stay.
Do you expect Jeremy Clarkson to become a part of your new party?
I can tell you, if Jeremy Clarkson decided to darken my doorstep, I would be absolutely delighted.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
7:19, you're listening to Talk Breakfast, and I've got to tell you that whilst the Andrew story bubbles away, there are plenty of political stories to look at as well. Sunday Telegraph, Mike Neville and Duncan Barks. Gordon Brown calls for police to probe Andrew's use of jets. Gordon Brown, former Prime Minister, has demanded a police investigation into whether Andrew Mountbatten Windsor used taxpayer-funded jets and RAF bases to meet up with the paedophile Jeffrey Epstein. In letters sent to 6 police forces, the Sunday Telegraph can reveal that the former Prime Minister suggested that civil servants be hauled in for questioning about Mountbatten Windsor's time as a trade envoy between 2001 and 2011. Now, I'm more than happy, Mike Neville, for us to have a look at Andrew's alleged use of RAF jets to meet Epstein. But I smell a political rat here. This is Gordon Brown, who I think is covering his backside, given the fact that he's the man who, as Prime Minister, brought Lord Mandelson back into the political front line.
Well, there's all sorts of smoke screens going on here, isn't it? We know that Brown doesn't get on with Mandelson, and then everybody's piling in on the former Prince Andrew, who I think is an arrogant and horrible man. But there comes a point when we've got to, the man has not been found guilty yet. So let's see what happens next. But I think in Britain we get to the point where, if it's a pile-on, we start to say, right, let's just stop doing this now. Let's let the investigation take its course. If he's guilty, let him be found guilty and let him be sent to prison. But yeah, everybody's trying to cover their tracks, I think, at the moment.
Well, most definitely. I'm so sorry, Duncan Barks. I'll take no lectures from Gordon Brown, who, in my view, was a terrible Prime Minister, for seeking to focus on the activities of Andrew Mountbatten Windsor when he's the guy that brought a man he detested back into frontline politics. Why? Because he was struggling so much as Prime Minister, and it was a desperate move because of desperate measures.
Absolutely. So I think there is a little bit of back covering going on here, but also let's just think back a couple of weeks ago where we discovered, when many of these emails were released, these Epstein emails, particularly between him and Mandelson, that there was that email that talked about Mandelson finally persuading Gordon Brown to go. Do you remember?
Oh, most definitely.
And so not only is there back covering going on here, but there's massive kind of point scoring going on, and I think Brown is going out of his way to try and punish Mandelson as best he can.
Indeed, and we need a new item on the show, don't we, Mike Neville? You couldn't make it up. This is Nigel Farage's efforts to go to the Chagos Islands. Now, Nigel Farage, for his sins, is the effective leader of the opposition. Statistically, based upon the polls, he's our next Prime Minister, and he can't get onto British soil in the Chagos Islands because the UK authorities will not let him. They don't want him there. This is a breaking story, Mike. He's accused the British government of trying to thwart his mission to send aid and supplies to the 4 brave British Chagosians that arrived in that territory this week. So the leader of Reform UK flew to the Maldives last week with equipment to assist 4 Chagosians who are attempting to establish a permanent base on a deserted island in the Chagos Islands. So he's trying to help them, but they won't let him onto this territory, and he's had to fly back to the UK.
Yeah, of course they won't let him, because they want this deal to be pushed ahead. You've got a government led by human rights lawyers who are obsessed with this international law, and we're seeing already, aren't we, that the Defence Secretary may well have told untruths when he said there was some imminent threat, from some international court. And these courts have little power. If we say we're staying there, that's the end of it. But I think what most people will see is the hypocrisy of Starmer, who made this big deal about the Greenlanders. The people from Greenland must be able to set their own agenda. They must decide what happens to their island. And then you've got these 4 chaps on the Chagos Islands being told, get off. Here's an injunction. You can't decide the fate of your own country because it suits a lefty lawyer view of the world that we've got to hand it to Mauritius. And I always think, when you look at that, the flags you can see with the Union Jack in the corner, when people go on about the British Empire, I always ask myself, what would the people of Hong Kong wanted? Do the people on Chagos and Mauritius want to be ruled by China, have that Chinese evil influence upon them? I say no.
Most definitely. Well, that's the point. I worry about a deal, Duncan, that the Americans hate and that the Chinese love.
Yeah, I mean, let's be honest. The reason that they won't let Farage anywhere near this is because Starmer just wants this out of the spotlight. He knows it's a bad deal. He knows he's vulnerable. He knows that he's hacked off Donald Trump as a result of this deal. I've said before elsewhere, and, you made the point earlier that talk viewers and listeners don't like nuance.
I was definitely joking. They most definitely do.
I have a sliver of sympathy with Starmer, and hear me out, because Trump has flip-flopped over this, hasn't he? He's kind of like done, it's a great deal, it's not a good deal. This is a crazy deal, it's not a good deal. And if you're Starmer, who is not the world's greatest politician, where does he go with it? What does he do? And all Farage is doing, by trying to get to Chagos here, is highlighting how bad a deal it is for not just Chagosians, right, who have a right to self-determination, like you'd hope most countries around the world, most populations around the world, but how bad a deal this is for national security, but also for the taxpayer. Because not only are we giving these islands away, we're paying Mauritius to take the islands over 100 years, 35 billion quid. Starmer doesn't want to see this front page of the Sunday Telegraph. He doesn't want Farage highlighting the shambles that is the Chagos deal.
What Nigel doesn't understand, Mike Neville, Nigel Farage is on record as saying, I honestly do not know why the Prime Minister is so keen to give away the Chagos Islands. I don't know why. My viewers and listeners aren't clear. Duncan Barks is not sure.
No.
Because we're paying $35 billion for the great pleasure. Mike, what is your estimation? Why do you think that the Prime Minister is so willing to die on this hill?
Because he's a globalist and he's a human rights and international lawyer. He's obsessed with these things. This is like a religion to him. So if an international court said to him, you've got to chop your mother's head off, he'd chop his mother's head off.
Yeah.
It's a cult. There's no common sense here. He doesn't think of Britain's best interests. We have the bizarre situation of a British Prime Minister who doesn't put Britain's interests first. He's obsessed with this international law. You're going to have to hear him speak. And it's absolutely crazy. In a world with so many threats, in a world where China's threatening domination, they're handing over this strategic base to Mauritius, who are under the influence of the Communist Party in Beijing. It is truly shocking. What kind of Prime Minister has been voted in to run this nation?
You have to wonder, don't you? A big reaction, Mike and Duncan, to the news that an award-winning police detective who was one of the first on the scene at the London Bridge terror attacks is sacked for jokes, politically incorrect jokes on WhatsApp. Literally lost his job, career over. And Natasha says, good morning, Mark. It's what the left do with false piety. They get rid of the decent people, in this case a brave policeman, and keep the weak, poor quality staff in order to control them. and push their political ideology. I just wonder about this story, Mike. It's important, isn't it, for the police officers involved that they can let off steam and have privacy in these WhatsApp groups. And it's very difficult when you face danger on a daily basis, and one release valve is, you know, edgy humour, gallows humour. Isn't that part of the reality of being a cop?
Well, one of the things they did in police stations, they got rid of all the bars, and these used to be like equivalent of a sergeant's mess, an officer's mess, and whatever else, and people could go in there and have a drink. And what this has done, of course, is just increase the levels of stress, because at some point, when you've seen horrible things, when you've seen dead bodies, when you've seen explosions, when you've been faced with people with knives and guns, you have to let off steam. Now, the way to deal with this, if people go too far, is to have a discipline service where you've got a sergeant and inspector who can deal with these things and give appropriate punishments. But here, just chopping somebody's head off, getting rid of their job because of some stupid comments in a private group. This is not somebody who stood in the street and called people names while on duty, being a professional. This is a private group. And as I say, the key thing for me, common sense needs to apply, and common sense has been swept away by the left, who have their own agenda.
Most definitely. I mean, that's the problem, Mike. You know, who would be a soldier if, thanks to a prime minister like Starmer, you'll get prosecuted for serving your country decades previously? Who would be a cop when you get investigated for apprehending a criminal, or in this case, making a joke in a private group? I mean, the messaging is a disaster, and this is not going to help recruitment.
Well, we know, don't we, that the British Transport Police, the level of thefts and robberies they solve is very, very small, you know, considering they've got all this CCTV covering the tube and the train stations. And the question is, how much time was spent investigating this WhatsApp group, and not that time could have been spent investigating thefts? You know, there's like a story about bicycles, I think, in Cambridge, and if you leave your bike in Cambridge, so somebody just nicks it, or you get robbed on the tube. And this is what the public would rather have the police doing. But what you have is a disconnect. You have a disconnect between the elite, and that includes some of the very senior police officers, and the views of the public. And somehow we've got to get that connection back.
It was funny you should mention British Transport Police, because it was just a month ago that it came to light, Mike, that non-Brits, immigrants, make up to 80% of offences around train thefts. So maybe they should have focused on that rather than someone's jokes on their phone.
Absolutely. And at least now, though, at least we've been told the truth about crime for about 2 decades. Anybody who raised the spectre of, you know, who is committing crime, what racial groups, what ethnic groups are committing crime, was immediately condemned. But I'm afraid that it's got so bad now that you cannot hide the truth. You can't hide the evidence from people's own eyes. And it's got so bad now with the amount of offending. You know, I always say this, that my 4 great-grandfathers, 3 of them were in the trenches in the First World War, and 1 of them was down the mines. If we went to prisons, how many people would be like me? And I will suggest very few.
Mike, we love having you on the show. You talk a lot of sense. My only regret regarding you is that you're no longer a serving cop. But luckily, the police force is our benefit, because you join us so regularly here on Talk Breakfast. Mike Neville, retired Scotland Yard Detective Chief Inspector. And Mike's common sense and Mike's attitude and Mike's focus on tackling real crime is what's sorely lacking within the culture of British policing these days. Now, that's not to say, Duncan, that there aren't brave cops out there. We saw a female police officer telling a group of British Muslims in a viral video this weekend that we've got free speech, so you can have Christians in their community being critical of Islam. But overall, there's an issue not just with resourcing of policing, but also the culture.
I think so. And I mean, it's great having people like Mike on, because we get a bit of insight that perhaps you and I would not be familiar with. And I'm genuinely struck by something he said about the bars being closed in police stations. All right. It is so easy to have a go at anyone who works in the police, or indeed the armed forces, and say, oh, well, you shouldn't have done this, you should have done that, and you should have done it differently, or whatever. All right. The people who make those criticisms have no understanding of what it's like to serve for your country, or indeed to be a police officer in this country on the front line and dealing with stuff day after day after day. And Mike made the point, quite rightly, that you're dealing with sometimes people who've got knives or guns. You don't know if your life is at risk. You've seen dead bodies, right? You know, I've seen a dead body. I don't know if you've seen a dead body.
No.
If you start seeing dead bodies repeatedly, it affects you massively, all right? You cannot erase that from your mind ever. So if you're a copper and you've seen someone who's been stabbed to death or shot, or heaven forbid, a child who's lost its life, right? That stuff remains with you for always. You need some kind of outlet. And I was struck by what Mike said with the idea that, you know, in the old days, you come off shift, you might have a couple of jars, that was your release valve, and then you get in the bus and you go home or whatever, job done. That has disappeared. Now, I'm not making excuses for the language that saw this man lose his job, and just for the record again, he shouldn't have lost his job. However, people are only human. Police officers are only human. If you expect them to deal with, to be blunt, the scum of society and put their own lives at risk, you've got to accept they need some kind of outlet. And if they're in part of a messaging group that is just kind of something where there's a community where they're together, that you can shoot the breeze about stuff, and someone uses inappropriate language, don't sack the bloke.
Most definitely, and I don't love the casual slur that he used in regard to these folk. I wouldn't call it dark racism. I would call it inappropriate. Not a million miles away from Jimmy Carr's joke on stage in front of many thousands of people when he said that around 1 million travellers were killed, so the Holocaust wasn't all bad. Now, again, it's not my favourite joke. It's probably not something that I would say on stage or on this platform, but is that a sackable offence? No. He's a comedian. We have free speech. And similarly with this guy, I just don't understand, Duncan Barks, how a man that was one of the first on scene at the London Bridge terror attacks losing his career, I don't see how that's a win for the British people.
I don't see it at all. And as we talked about earlier, we need more people like this. And all this will do is make people who are thinking, might join the police force, look at this and just go, blimey, do you know what, it's too risky. Because I might have a few beers one night as part of a WhatsApp group. I might send a joke that's in bad taste to a mate of mine. But heaven forbid, if that ever sees the light, I might lose my job.
Too right. Duncan, you're back on air, hosting very soon.
Yes, Friday evening, 7 o'clock.
Well, that's what I would call a must-listen. Thank you so much for joining us.
Always a pleasure, Mark.
Brilliant conversation. Really, really enjoyed. If you're just joining us, you might want to go back on the YouTube feed to the start of the show later and listen to Duncan's amazing story of the air crash that involved Nigel Farage. Which Duncan
that is a broadcast exclusive.
Well, there you go. We got there first. Thank you so much for that. You're listening to Talk Breakfast. Are Reform UK Britain's only hope? Your calls next.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
7:37, you are listening to Talk Breakfast. So much opinion coming through on a range of topics. So let me get to your messages. I've got to tell you that Dolan's dispatch today is a pretty spicy one. It's about Nigel Farage and about Reform UK. And I'll be giving my verdict on whether Reform are Britain's last hope. I think you'll find it very interesting indeed. And what I've got to say may surprise you. That is Dolan's dispatch at exactly 9 a.m. But I'm going to tell you that there's an amazing story floating around. An award-winning police detective who was one of the first on scene at the London Bridge terror attacks has been sacked for off-colour jokes in a private message group on WhatsApp. How is that a win for the country that a brave police officer loses his job for being politically incorrect with his friends? Chris is in Epsom. He's a friend of mine. Good morning, Chris.
Morning, Mike. Thank you for calling me a friend.
Well, you are a friend, Chris, because you talk a lot of sense on this show. We've bonded big time. What do you make of this story? I couldn't quite believe my eyes when Phil Dave presented it to me earlier today.
Well, I'm gonna give you 3 words to cover the last 3 days. Deflection, deflection, deflection.
Aha.
Right. First of all, we've got Andrew Mountbatten Windsor. Right. He's being thrown to the wolves worldwide so that other people can hide underneath the front covers that he's creating or they're creating for him.
Yeah.
Manderson wasn't even arrested for the bigger offence of misfeasance in public office. He wasn't even arrested. Only his homes were searched.
This was a government minister. Now, he denies all the allegations, but that's a much bigger smoking gun than anything that Andrew is faced with.
Exactly. So work that out. And as for this copper, there are very few men. Every man likes to think he's brave to a point, but there are very few men that actually run towards danger when there is known danger there. We're talking about policemen, firemen, and soldiers, basically, and to a certain degree, ambulance men. Although they're now, as we found out in Manchester, they're held back until the area's cleared. That copper, he used language that was street language in a private WhatsApp group, something that he possibly knew that is a word. You know, I use a word, which I'm not going to repeat here, and I use it for them. And I've got a friend of mine that was a traveller who's now built a nice house, and he lives about a quarter of a mile from me. His name's Simon. He and I get on really well. And I use that word with him to describe the others, and he agrees with me. Because, don't forget, you know, the bad element of them, don't pay any taxes, keep moving, break all the laws. If you ask any police force in the country, they'll tell you that the moving ones are a problem. They bought fields off of farmers and then over a weekend laid concrete and put houses up, and now the courts are saying that they can't be demolished. They take the absolute mick. They're like the illegal immigrants. They take the absolute mick out of our laws. And for a copper that's been that brave to have been pulled up and sacked for using a word like that is ridiculous. What happened, as Mike said, as Mike said, and I would say a strong warrant officer in the military, pulling you to one side, chewing your ear off, and then letting you back out, crack on, don't do it again.
Of course. And, you know, the truth is we can't tar everyone with the same brush. And I think that's very, very important indeed, Chris. But you know, you're entitled to your view.
Yeah, well, I'm not, because, as I said, I've got some traveller friends, but they refer to part of their own community with that word because there's an imbalance. You know, they're 180 degrees opposed. They're juxtaposition within society.
Well, listen, Chris, I mean, I can't disagree with that. And, you know, you're absolutely on the money. I really don't know what is going on with this country. I think the issue is, I mean, the policies are horrible, but there's something going on with the culture as well in our institutions, in our society. Chris, have an excellent Sunday, and we'll catch up soon. Another friend of mine joins us now, Georgina in the capital. Good morning, Georgina.
Good morning, Mark. How are you?
Well, listen, I'm very well, Georgina, but I'll take no lectures from Gordon Brown about the former Prince Andrew. We've got the front page of the Telegraph. Gordon Brown calls for police probe into Andrew's use of RAF jets. Why is Gordon Brown so focused on Andrew Mountbatten Windsor? We've not heard from Brown for years.
Well, while they're concentrating on Andrew Mountbatten Windsor, they're not concentrating on Gordon Brown, because it was him who actually took a Mr Mandelson back into government. I mean, I've always looked at Mandelson as a rotten egg, you know, and like the rest of the Labour Party, he's like the alternative Robin Hood. He takes from everyone but gives to himself. You know, I wouldn't trust the man as far as I could throw him. I mean, I think Andrew Mountbatten Windsor, he has taken the limelight because he's such a prevalent figure in our community. And that's put Mandelson on the back burner, so to speak, for a little while. But I don't think it's going to be long before Mandelson himself is trawled in to the police station for questioning. As far as I'm concerned, the pair of them, both Mountbatten Windsor and Mandelson, are traitors to this country. And I think Gordon Brown is actually sweating at the moment, and that's why he's trying to deviate any limelight from himself and put it on to others like Andrew, you know. But I mean, I've been up watching you since 6 o'clock this morning, and it's all corruption, all bad news. I mean, I've never experienced anything quite like this, and it's not getting any better, Mark. It's getting worse as the days progress. I mean, I'm going into hospital for a week to have the pins taken out of my jaw because I've been talking through my teeth for the past 5 months. But let me tell you, even though my jaw has been wired, I still need to talk about what's gone on because I can't get over the amount of corruption in this government, and nothing, they're not doing
Drain the swamp. Drain the swamp. You know, why are they giving away sovereign British territory?
Well, they can't do that. They can't give away something that we own. It's like selling your house and then giving someone the money to take it off your hands. You can't do this. This is not a normal thing. Now, what I think, and this is my opinion, I think a lot of people have made a lot of money out of this deal, and that's why they're trying to push it through.
Georgina, you're right. There's a pot of 8 million that Starmer's mates have got access to as a result of this act of treachery. Georgina, without intruding on private grief, are you okay now? How's your health, and why did you have to have this procedure on your jaw?
I had surgery on my jaw 5 months ago.
Oh my goodness.
Because I had very serious listen, I'm not a young woman, and I had very serious deterioration in my upper and lower mandible, 80% deterioration.
Gosh.
So I've had to have all bone grafts, and they have actually pinned my jaw together. So I'm speaking through my teeth. That's why my speech sounds very, well, I think it's inaudible, to be honest.
Well, no, you're still, you won't be muzzled, Georgina, but my heart goes out to you. That sounds very very painful procedure. What is your prognosis? Are you hoping to then enjoy better health once all of that apparatus is removed?
Well, I'm not intending on dying anytime soon, and I want to find out. I want to be around when Nigel Farage becomes Prime Minister. I actually went to Essex to watch him in one of his fabulous conferences, and let me tell you, I was so elevated listening to that man. He's got such a passion for this country and optimism. I haven't heard optimism like that about our country and the people in our country for so long. I think people have been downtrodden for so long, Mark. They've actually forgotten how fabulous they are. The British people are fabulous people, and Britain is a fabulous country. And at the end of the conference, after he was speaking, and it was all positive, and that's what we need. And at the end of it all, we all stood up and sang the national anthem. Now, that for me, honestly, brought a tear to my eye that we still have that patriotic feeling in our country. And Nigel Farage, honestly, I mean, I can tell a bad egg from a mile away. I've had plenty of practice. And that man has got such passion to get this country back on its feet. And, I mean, it's just wonderful. And as long as I take breath, I will shout and advocate for that man, because I really do feel that he has the best intentions for Britain and for the British population.
Georgina, you're in fine voice this morning. We wish you a speedy recovery, and nothing will stop you dropping your truth bombs, and we're so grateful that you do it here on this network. Next up, I've got royal breaking news, and it's big. Don't go anywhere.
breaking news in the last couple of moments. Extraordinary news. The police have arrested Andrew Mountbatten Windsor. It's his 66th birthday today. What a birthday present that is.
Mr. Mandarin, how long do you think that you can stay on the island?
We're going to stay forever. Our rights have to be respected now. We're going to stay.
Do you expect Jeremy Clarkson to become a part of your new party?
I can tell you, if Jeremy Clarkson decided to darken my doorstep, I would be absolutely delighted.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Breaking royal news at 7:50, a Mail on Sunday exclusive. The royal family's good name is being abused, whistleblower told the palace, and here is the devastating headline. Email proves King Charles was warned about his brother Andrew's secret deals. Now, this has major implications. King Charles was warned as long ago as 2019 that the royal family's name was being abused by Andrew Mountbatten Windsor's business associations. In a bombshell email, a whistleblower told the palace that the former Duke had secret financial links to controversial millionaire financier David Rowland, who was abusing his royal links. Messages seen by the Mail on Sunday also appear to show that Andrew, who was sensationally arrested on Thursday over suspicions of misconduct in public office, allowed Mr. Rowland to effectively join in with his official duties. Well, the real killer headline is email proves Charles was warned about Andrew. Let's have a look at the implications of this in the company of Rupert Bell, who is Talk's royal correspondent. Good morning, Rupert.
Good morning, Mark.
What a piece of news to wake up to.
Yeah, well, this was always likely to be where it could be heading, because there is still so many questions to be answered with the king, because obviously how much may have he known even about the Virginia Giuffre payment and what was involved there? And have they at any stage been sort of shielding and protecting his younger brother? And these emails just, while he's still, innocent until proven guilty in a court of law, it's the way that this drip feed of sort of allegations are sort of tarnishing and continuing to tarnish the reputation of the royal family. Andrew is dragging them down by his various associations with people that are causing problems. And that is why it led, obviously, to the scenes we saw on Thursday morning with him being driven away to a police station in Norfolk. And we are not going to see the end of this. This will continue. And once it gets to a court of law, then again, further revelations, I'm sure, as people make their defense or the prosecution. So it's all going to be very uncomfortable reading for all members of the royal family. And obviously, it most notably for the king, because really, how much did he know? If back in 2019, he knew that Andrew was potentially abusing his position and passing on information, which is part of the allegations that the police are investigating, then this is a further damaging look for the royal family. It can't be good.
Well, that's right. And following a lot of feedback from my viewers and listeners, Rupert, I've focused a little less on Andrew today because there are many problems facing the country. And one of the reasons why editorially I can justify that is because it's quite clear that as a brand, Andrew is over. Notwithstanding these serious criminal allegations that face him, which he denies, he's a busted flush. Andrew is over. The issue we've got here in regard to this exclusive from the Mail on Sunday is collateral damage to the king.
Yeah, and to the royal family as a whole. And that is where this whole situation is leading. You're right, Andrew is toast, burnt toast. And as a result, and Sarah Ferguson, we keep reading about what she's been getting up to, and what's going on. So that brand is well and truly a busted flush. Right, now the royal family are trying to make sure they're not being dragged into the situation, and yet it's going to be very hard for them, and particularly for the king. And obviously, when the late Queen was alive, she was, deemed to be often protecting her son, trying to make sure that he, still seemed to be behaving within the sort of bounds of respectability. But, when you've got these payments of $12 million going out, with actually most people will say, why? And then you see these emails, and there were warnings throughout Andrew's time as trade envoy, and people saying that he was potentially abusing his position. So the royal family know that at the moment Andrew is eating away by his actions at the credibility of the royal family, and this is where it becomes a constitutional issue. And for the king, in his mid-70s, as we've said before, battling his own health issues, this is a big strain on him, because he'll be waking up, seeing these headlines and thinking, here we go again.
And if Charles turned a blind eye to what was happening in 2019, would you put that down to naivety, incompetence, or misguided loyalty to his younger brother?
I suppose at once, the last of those you'd probably feel, because it's a family situation. If you take out the overall situation, yes, he's in the royal family, but he's still his younger brother. Now, that is always something, families do stick together, and the royal family have this would always try to be seen to sticking together. But it feels like this is misguided loyalty if he didn't get a grip of it. We don't know the full details of these emails, and absolutely what may or may not have been said at the time. Bearing in mind, in 2019, he was stripped of being in public life. And perhaps if you look at what was happening then, probably the king might have said, well, you're off into exile as it is now in 2019. That's the end of it. We knew, and that's perhaps what we did at the time. But this is the problem. They thought it may go away then, but it hasn't. It's just got worse and worse. And with the release of all these Epstein files, it has led to the scenes that we saw on Thursday morning. So I think the royal family thought they were dealing with it and maybe believed what Andrew may have said to them. I don't know what conversations took place. And they said, OK, we draw a line in the sand here. But the reason I think that we saw him being stripped of his title as prince and various other, the Duke of York at the time, was because in the end, the king lost patience and said, I don't know where this is going to end. I've got to take another step further. Well, the next step further will be to lose his place in the order of succession, which has to go through Parliament, for which he is 8th in line to the throne.
And it's therefore, following this rather devastating exclusive on the part of the Mail on Sunday and their excellent political journalist Glenn Owen and our own international editor Isabel Oakeshott, who's going to join me at 8:05 in just a few minutes' time. With this new headline, email proves Charles was warned about Andrew's secret deals. It's now not inconceivable, Rupert, that the king may fall.
Well, I think that's
not
a hard one.
Not next week, not next month, but if there's a sufficient argument that can be put together that the king knew what Andrew was up to, it becomes untenable, doesn't it?
I think you have to wait to the court of law. At the moment, you can't just by association, guilt by association. That is what you're sort of implying there.
Right.
Is it? Yeah, and you can't do that. You have to prove things in a court of law. Now, if Andrew is found to have done what it may be is alleged, then, and is found guilty, and then through the court of law, it comes out that maybe there was some protection of Andrew going on, then yes. But until that stage, you can't do everything.
But
just
even politically, it would be difficult for the king, wouldn't it? In these modern times, Rupert, where the CEO always has to step down, even if it's a junior that made the mistake, if Andrew is convicted and Charles knew anything, it's harder for him to stay king.
It is hard, and it will be hard, because the court of public opinion will be very much against him, and that will be heartbreaking for him. But if they have protected Andrew, because it comes out in wherever, then it will put pressure on the king. But at the moment, we mustn't get ahead of ourselves.
Yes.
We keep being surprised by all these revelations.
Wise words. Rupert, always a highlight to have you on. More on...
Just breaking news in the last couple of moments. Extraordinary news. Not just that the police have arrived at the Sandringham estate where Prince Andrew, as was now Andrew Mountbatten Windsor, is currently living since being thrown out of the Windsor estate. The police have arrested Andrew Mountbatten Windsor. It's an extraordinary revelation and development on this story involving the Epstein files and all the allegations that have been swirling around about Andrew over the many years, from Virginia Giuffre, now sadly deceased, and since then, and certainly what's been contained in the Epstein files as released in the last few weeks. But the police have arrived at Sandringham estate this morning, where Andrew has made his new home. It's his 66th birthday today. What a birthday present that is. He has been arrested by the police. Of course, the brother of the current king, the second son of our late Queen Elizabeth. This is an extraordinary development. Those of us who've been talking an awful lot about establishment cover-ups and lack of, should we say, interest by the police in what are very, very serious allegations against Andrew. Perhaps they're pleased that that pressure has finally been put on the police, and they have done the job of actually looking into these issues seriously. Must bear in mind, of course, that the Prince has not been charged with any crime at this point, and he has always denied any wrongdoing in relation to any of the allegations about him. We'll give you more on that. We'll talk to you about that throughout the show, but I'm just being told that the arrest has been on suspicion of misconduct in public office. This, of course, relates to those Epstein file allegations and the documents that, if they are true, would suggest that he had, it is alleged, passed on basically what was confidential government information when he was the UK trade envoy for this country for 10 years to Jeffrey Epstein for Jeffrey Epstein's financial gain.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Coming up to 3 minutes past 8. Happy Sunday, one and all, whatever you're up to. Perhaps you're slumbering in bed after a big night on the tiles, in which case I thank you for your contribution to British hospitality. I think it's our duty to go and have a pint in our local. You may be at the tail end of a work shift, a night shift, or perhaps you're getting ready to go to work today. Whatever you're up to, getting the kids off to football practice, whatever you're doing, we are here. We've got your back. This is the home of common sense. And breaking this morning, Nigel Farage stranded in the ocean as his efforts to bring aid and medical supplies to the 4 residents of the Chagos Islands are thwarted. The British authorities do not want Farage on Chagos. So here's a question for you at 3 minutes past 8 on a Sunday morning. Can this hated deal to give away British land at a cost of 35 billion quid be stopped? Meanwhile, Donald Trump adds extra tariffs to the UK following the Supreme Court ruling on his flagship tariff policy. Will this put more pressure on the British economy? Is it bad news for Rachel from Accounts? Is Britain heading for recession? And what about this story? This is absolutely wild. We need a new item on the programme. You couldn't make it up. An award-winning police detective who was one of the first on the scene at the London Bridge terror attacks, a provably brave man, is sacked for politically incorrect jokes on a private WhatsApp group. So he lets off steam with his colleagues. He's a very brave man. He runs towards danger, and his career is ended because he's a little bit not woke in some of his remarks. How is that a win for the British people? And this week, Nigel Farage unveiled his effective shadow cabinet. And my question for you at 8:05 on a Sunday morning, we know he's not perfect. Far from it. And Reform UK, it's not a democratic party. It's the Nigel Show. But is Nigel Farage now Britain's only hope? Well, that's the topic of today's Dolan's Dispatch at 9 a.m. I recommend you don't miss it. You can listen on the radio, DAB Plus in app and online, or you can watch us because this is a TV show. And therefore, all you do is you head to YouTube, you search Talking Up, we pop. Can't do it without you. My phone number is 03444991000. Is Nigel Farage? We know he's not perfect. Is he Britain's only hope? Tommy's taking your calls. You can text the word talk and your message to 87222, or you can leave a voice note. Producer Dave is busy filtering your voice notes through. We'll get them on the radio, we'll get them on the telly, and as the saying goes, let's talk. And let's get to your front pages because I'll tell you there's so many stories floating around. The Sunday Telegraph, Gordon Brown calls for police to probe Andrew's use of jets. Former PM demands civil servants face questions over taxpayer-funded flights. Well, I've got questions for Gordon Brown, who's one of the worst prime ministers in the history of this country, who borrowed money during a period of economic growth under New Labour, an awful chancellor. And why is he so focused on Andrew Mountbatten Windsor? Well, could it be because when he was Prime Minister, he brought back the disgraced Mandelson into the cabinet? We'll get to that shortly, but another massive story. A developing breaking story at 8:06. Mail on Sunday exclusive. The royal family's good name is being abused, whistleblower tells the palace. And here is the killer headline. This is damning, folks. Email proves King Charles was warned about his brother's secret deals. King Charles, says the Mail on Sunday, in a world exclusive, was told a long time ago, in fact, as long ago as 2019, that the royal family's name was being abused by Andrew Mountbatten Windsor's business associations. The paper have revealed that in a bombshell email, a whistleblower told the palace that the former Duke had secret financial links to controversial millionaire financier David Rowland, who was abusing his royal links. Messages seen by the Mail on Sunday also appear to show that Andrew, who was sensationally arrested on Thursday over suspicions of misconduct in public office, allowed Mr. Rowland to effectively join in with his official duties. Well, the headline, folks, is that King Charles, according to this world exclusive, knew about Andrew's activities. Could this have implications for his position as the monarch of this country? Isabel Oakeshott is the co-author of this world exclusive. She joins us now. Good morning, Isabel.
Good morning, Mark. Well, I feel that this is the direction that this whole sorry saga is heading. I think the questions now are really, what did the most senior members of the royal family, obviously the buck ultimately stopping with the king now, know about Andrew's behaviour? When did they find out about it? And what did they actually do about it? And what my exclusive in today's Mail on Sunday reveals is that the king was warned that Andrew was basically enmeshed with some pretty questionable characters as he sought to fund his lavish lifestyle. For many years, there were questions over how on earth Andrew was actually paying for things, because he was clearly living a very fancy lifestyle, private jets, fancy hotels, traveling all over the world. Well, some years ago, I was able to answer that question through a cache of emails that I received between Andrew himself and two prominent businessmen known as the Rowlands, who he was working with. I was able to reveal how Andrew was making his money. And the answer to that was that he was acting as a door opener for the Rowlands, who had a private bank and business dealings all over the world in some extremely shady places. Now, crucially, the Rowlands weren't breaking any laws. They were being pretty smart, actually. This arrangement worked brilliantly for them because they looked after Andrew, and in turn, Andrew, who was able to go all around the world in his capacity as the UK's trade envoy, Andrew had access to people that the rest of us can only dream of having access to. He was in and out of royal palaces all over the world, in and out of diplomatic residences, able to access chairmen and CEOs of the world's biggest companies. And what he did is allow the Rowlands to come along with him on many occasions. And that is how he was making his money. And what I've revealed today is that the king was told about this arrangement, and he was warned about the type of people and regimes that the Rowlands were doing business with. And once again, we're not saying that the Rowlands were doing anything illegal, but they were making some interesting judgments about the type of people that they wanted to act as bankers for and the type of countries that they were prepared to engage with. So I'm talking hostile regimes, I'm talking African states were of interest to them, the kind of places that you and I, Mark, would say, those have trouble written all over them.
Most definitely. And notwithstanding the serious criminal allegations, Isabel, that face Andrew Mountbatten-Windsor, which he denies, it's priced in that Andrew is a man of poor judgment. It's priced in that Andrew is, to a degree, a wrong-un who's brought disrepute on the royal family. The guy's toast. He's a busted flush. The problem here, and what's so devastating in regard to your world exclusive, is that this implicates the king. It's not impossible in the months ahead that the king's position becomes untenable.
So, and I think that there's an institutional problem here. They knew how Andrew was behaving and they just sort of hoped it would go away. And I was speaking to someone this morning who likened this scandal to the MP's expenses scandal. And I actually thought that was quite an interesting analogy. And what this person said is somebody who is very well connected with Andrew and Sarah, was that actually the way that the royals, and it's not just Andrew, have behaved over a very long periods of time is one of entitlement and quite regularly taking things from other rich people, whether that's free holidays, whether that's the use of yachts, the use of helicopters, the use of private planes. All of that has been just the way they operate and have done, well, frankly, probably for centuries, but in any case, certainly for decades. And they haven't felt that they need to be accountable for that. And that is exactly how it was with MPs before the MPs' expenses scandal blew up. And I think that is why this now goes wider. This is about what is this royal family for? How do they account for their lifestyles? And what are we, the taxpayer, prepared to put up with? Is there now going to be more scrutiny on the way they're living and the kind of perks that they have taken for granted that go with the job?
Most definitely. And if it can be proven that Charles was aware of Andrew's secret deals, well, it's tantamount to the mother of all cover-ups.
So, crucially, the King's people are not denying that this email was received. It went to the Queen's lawyers. It was CC'd to a number of people who would have had a duty. I think they would have been duty bound to alert the King himself. Interestingly, the sender tried to use an email format for the King, which he knew worked for Andrew. It was a variation of Andrew's private email address. And apparently the King doesn't use email and didn't then as the Prince of Wales. But the sender was clever and CC'd a couple of quite important people and got their email right. And those people ought to have alerted the then Prince of Wales, the future King, to the content of that message. So I think the King was told about this, and I think he just thought, well, this is just some disgruntled person who's in a financial dispute with the Rowlands. That was the backdrop to it. What's this got to do with me? And probably did nothing about it. Now, it's possible the palace will come out and say, well, you know what, actually, the King did take this seriously and he did do something about it. But it's not really their modus operandi, is it? And they just sort of hope by being quiet, hopefully it'll go away.
Well, I think this extraordinary piece of journalism moves the dial in this conversation. And there's a sword of Damocles hanging over the boss now, in my humble opinion, Isabel. Not today, not tomorrow, not next week, but in time. And I've got to tell you that royal expert after royal expert rubbished my suggestions this week that Charles is under pressure. And I think that your world exclusive absolutely puts him under pressure. And I'll tell you for why. He was just the Prince of Wales when that email that you've exposed may well have gone to him, 2019, just the Prince of Wales. So he wasn't the boss. Fair enough. Similarly, in 2020, when that cheque reportedly for 12 million quid in an out-of-court settlement with Virginia Giuffre was signed, again, he was the Prince of Wales, not the boss. But he takes to the throne in that context with the background of all of that information, at which point Andrew remains the Duke of York. Andrew remains a member of the Order of the Royal Garter. Andrew remains effectively an active member of the royal family, attending church services, and remains a resident of the Royal Lodge on the Windsor estate. And that is the political problem for Charles.
Do you know, I think Charles was probably so preoccupied with what for him was the more immediate crisis, which was the behaviour of his younger son. There's only so many massive family nightmares anyone can deal with at any one time. I think a lot of people will sympathise. If you've got several problem people in your family, you're going to try and deal with the first and worst most. And Andrew's problems and behaviour had been well known in a broader sense for a long time. And I suspect the future King, was just fully immersed in dealing with all the other headaches, the Meghan and Harry headache that went on and is still not resolved. And then, of course, now he's got his health problems. I think a lot of people will actually feel sorry for the King. So counter to what we're saying, yes, I think he's under pressure. But an awful lot of voters in our country will be like, you know what, my God, he's had an awful time. He's got cancer. His youngest son is a complete wastrel. It's just been an ongoing nightmare. And his younger brother is just bringing everything down even further. And there's how much can one man take? That's the thing.
Do you feel sorry for the King because you are the fearless journalist, Isabel, that has exposed emails that potentially link Charles to this scandal, or at least demonstrate that this scandal was likely on the King's radar? Do you feel sorry for him?
I do a bit, and I think that this is combined with the Harry disaster, I think this is such a nightmare for the royal family, that really only turning a new page with William and Kate as our monarchs.
Bingo. All roads lead to William, don't they?
They do. I have to say... This
is a guy that can't stand his Uncle Andrew and wanted him chucked out of the firm in 2020.
I also think Catherine, she just doesn't put a foot wrong, you know, and I think to give our nation the kind of restart it needs on so many levels, having that younger generation now take over would make sense. But, you know, Charles is not going to do that voluntarily. No chance. And he will follow the example of his mother. He will feel duty bound to follow the example of his late mother, who, as we all know, kept going till her very dying hour. And I think that he will, there's just no way that he will step aside. But if I were to be advising them, I would actually, you know what, find a moment, not now, but find a moment for health reasons when you say, actually, it's time now to pass this down to my son.
Indeed. It is an extraordinary piece of journalism. If you're just joining us, breaking news at 8:19. Email proves Charles was warned about his brother's secret deals. This is a world exclusive in the Mail on Sunday from Isabel Oakeshott, international editor, and Glenn Owen. Isabel, this is a developing story. What do you think the legacy of this scoop is going to be?
I think that for the next few days, this is where the story will turn, and the pressure will be on Charles, the pressure will be on his people to explain what he has done over the years without having to be forced to do it. You know, have there been conversations behind the scenes? If I were advising the king, I would say, look, let's get some stuff out there about what you have proactively been doing over the years. Andrew's a dead duck, as you said, so it's no harm for the palace to let it be known that the king, you know, perhaps begged Andrew to stop doing certain things and Andrew simply wouldn't listen. There's ways of spinning this, and spin it they must.
Isabel, you've jumped in a cab to join us on Talk. We're very grateful for your time and sharing this massive scoop. I mean, it really is. It's story of the century. Mail on Sunday. Email proves King Charles was warned about his brother's secret deals. Isabel will speak very soon. Isabel Oakeshott, Talk's international editor. So much to come. I want to talk about politics as well, folks. I want to talk about inflation and £7 for a tub of bloody butter in the supermarket. £4 for yoghurt yesterday. I bought yoghurt yesterday, £4. Who's got £4 for yoghurt? So we're going to talk about the state of the country, the cost of net zero, highest energy bills in the developed world, open borders, and we'll do that with my two guests, one of whom likes Nigel Farage and the other that doesn't. This is Talk Breakfast.
Breaking news in the last couple of moments. Extraordinary news. The police have arrested Andrew Mountbatten Windsor. It's his 66th birthday today. What a birthday present that is.
Mr. Mandarin, how long do you think that you can stay on the island?
We're going to stay forever. Our rights have to be respected now. We're going to stay.
Do you expect Jeremy Clarkson to become a part of your new party?
I can tell you, if Jeremy Clarkson decided to darken my doorstep, I would be absolutely delighted.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Let's kick off with a couple of voice notes. A simple question today. He's not perfect, is he? But is Nigel Farage Britain's only hope? Here's Kevin.
Morning, Mark. Kevin in Sheffield. Really enjoyed your shows this week. Regarding reform, yes, I believe they're the last hope for this country. The Labour Party's going to be finished after this election. Conservative Party are finished, even though they don't want to believe it. And unfortunately, we've been getting Lib Dem policies for the last 30 years. So Lib Dems don't really have to do anything because most of their policies have been enacted by the Labour Party and the Conservatives. God forbid we ever get the Green Party anywhere near power, because that will be anarchy in this country, literally anarchy. I don't think it's going to be easy for reform because they're going to have to fight the blob. But listen, we can only hope and pray that reform are the next government.
Well, is Kevin right? We know Nigel Farage is not perfect, but is he Britain's last hope? With me in the studio, Peter Barnes, political strategist, and Andy Williams, political commentator. Andy, the truth is you may not be ideologically aligned with Nigel Farage, but he is pretty much our last hope, isn't he?
No, I don't agree with that at all. They don't have a plan for the country. I think if you look at the announcement that Reform made this week, where they unveiled their inverted commas shadow cabinet, and let's be clear, it's not a shadow cabinet because that's just not what they're called, they're spokespeople. It's pretty thin gruel. I mean, if you look at those, if you look at the calibre of those individuals, it's terrible.
I can assure you there's a plan. They're going to scrap net zero. That will save billions and bring down energy prices. They're going to close the border. They're going to stop the boats by tearing up the ECHR, the Human Rights Act, and looking again at the Refugee Convention. Sounds like a plan to me. They're going to reduce taxes
at what cost?
when the deficit
on
drops.
What timescale?
And how are they going to get the deficit down?
Yeah. This is the actual politics. This is the bit where speeches have to turn into policy. And unfortunately, Reform just haven't made the jump yet. I'm not saying I disagree with what they want to do. I actually am very much in favour of their entire agenda. However, it's about the implementation of it that it just doesn't exist.
And you would take a government that tries over one that doesn't, which would be Tories or Labour.
I think it's going to be a Tory Reform Pact. I think it'll be some kind of agreement after the general election.
Are you saying that's what you want, or that's what you think?
No, I generally think that's what. I also think that's what Reform actually want as well, because it's one of the reasons I think they brought Nadeem Zahawi on board, because he's got links to the Telegraph. And if you notice, since then there has been a big push for this pact ever since. Well, I think there's been a little backroom deal.
Well, I'll tell you who won't be having any of that: the British public, because Andy, Reform are going to win with the landslide. Kenny will be nowhere to be seen. Kemi. I called her Kenny. That was she's not just transition.
Look, I mean, I think if there was a general election tomorrow, I do think Reform would be the largest party. I don't think they'd get a majority.
We got there in the end.
I don't think they're going to win a landslide. I really strongly don't think that. And I also, I'm not in the Reform of peaked camp, because I think it's too early to say, but it's definitely too early to read the last rights on Labour. You know, if they're going to change leader, we know that Keir Starmer won't be fighting the next general election. And actually a lot of Labour's deep unpopularity is tied up with him as an individual. So if I don't think that changing the leader sorts it all out.
But I think you're right there, Andy, because when you look at favourability ratings, the difference between Nigel Farage and Keir Starmer is only by about 10 points, which is now in 3 years worth of time. It's difficult for Labour to kind of catch up on that point. It's a really, really good point. It's Starmer that's hated. It's not necessarily necessarily the Labour Party on a broader sense.
And what's really interesting is that if you look at, there's been a lot of polling done in the last few weeks on head-to-head. So if you could choose between Starmer or Farage or Badenoch, Farage loses in a head-to-head as an individual to every single leader apart from Zach Polanski.
Only because the public don't want to say to a woke graduate in a hoodie on the street that they admire Nigel, which they do.
I just don't agree with that. It's very easy to say, but actually we're talking about serious representative polling. The truth is there are 20, maybe 25% of people who do really like Nigel Farage, but there's 30, 35 or maybe even 40% of people who can't stand him. He's actually not as popular in this room. In this studio and in this building, you believe that he was the most popular person in Britain, and it's not true.
Well, wake up and smell the coffee, because change is coming, and I will tell you, and I speak as no cheerleader of Nigel Farage. I think that Nigel Farage is not a perfect human being whatsoever. I'm going to be talking about it in my Dolan's Dispatch, which is going to surprise a few people. Reform UK is no democracy. No, it is the Nigel show. Of course it is. And if he gets into number 10, it will be presidential. But can I tell you something? I'll give you a little bit of history, because you're both so young. You don't have to be popular to win elections. Margaret Thatcher was a hated figure by perhaps the majority of the public, but 3 landslides. Similarly, Tony Blair was not everyone's cup of tea.
An ideology,
and the issue you've got, it's the same in the United States, 2024 November. Trump wins. Around 78 million people voted for Trump. At least half of them couldn't stand him. But what they wanted is the southern border to be closed. They didn't want wokery in the public institutions. They wanted an America First policy, bring back jobs. So they voted for the bad orange man, and the same thing's going to happen in this country in about 2 years' time.
I think it's possible, and I think the major reason for Reform's popularity and their lead in the polls that's been, it's been going on for a year, so it's not a flash in the pan. Reform has become a vessel for everybody's discontent, but I'm not convinced.
That is an insult to my viewers and listeners who support Farage.
You've just made the argument for it.
You've just belittled many of the people that listen to this show and watch it, who actually feel that Nigel is the final roll of the dice.
This is my.
You're calling them a bunch of protesters in anoraks.
No. There is
a real insult.
There is a hardcore who absolutely believe Nigel Farage is the best thing since sliced bread.
Hardcore. What are they? Far right?
If you look at but a hardcore in the same way. In the same way as there is a hardcore of people who will always vote Labour. There's a hardcore of people who always vote Conservative. There are even people who go to Lib Dem Party.
This is obnoxious language.
No, it's not.
How dare you talk about people like that?
You do it more than we do it. You keep Reform as a protest group. Every time you say, well, the Tories had 14 years, you are framing Reform as anti the other thing. So therefore, you're keeping them as a protest group.
Not us. Want to know what?
Not us.
and I will say I've got deep misgivings about the Reform project. Okay, I can assure you. And I think particularly what's going to happen is it's going to be an ego fest at the top of that party.
That's just Robert Jenrick.
That's Lee Anderson.
But so I'm, and I think, what I think, if you want me to frame the Reform offer, I think it's, in a word, conservatism. I think what's happened, Peter, is that enough of the public simply want a right-wing government. They don't care who delivers it. And I think, I promise, let me know, guys, give me a call. But I think a lot of people think that Farage, he ain't the finished article. But if he delivers conservatism, which we've not had since, 1990, then bring it on.
Well, I'd love a Conservative government. I'm as right-wing as they come. However, I don't think Nigel Farage is going to deliver it because he wants to nationalise. He's got to spend welfare. It is pinko policies through and through.
This is a tired old narrative about nationalisation. You must have had your wings clipped when Robert Jenrick said that the party was not going to have tax cuts until it could be afforded.
Well,
which rather undermined your anti-Farage
because they had to bring in Robert Jenrick for that position, because Nigel Farage said, I don't need to do my sums because nobody else did, and then shouted boring at a journalist. They had to bring him in because they have no economic credibility. So you can make the comparisons to Thatcher, but Thatcher actually understood the economics.
Well, I think that scrapping the net zero target might save us a quid or two, Andy.
Not necessarily, because there's all sorts of reasons why actually, whether you call it a net zero agenda or an agenda that's about actually recognising the challenges we have with the planet and trying to deal with
What is this word salad?
Well, what I'm trying to say, in not the most erudite terms, is that net zero is a cause worth fighting for, and you can actually make an economic argument for it as well.
How's that going? We've got the highest energy costs in Europe.
Yeah, and that is a
thanks to our devotion to green renewables.
Well, not entirely.
I'm all for it. I want to save the planet too. I'm happy with solar panels. We should put one on the top of the News UK building, and it could power TalkSport, Virgin, and Times Radio. But we'll stay fossil because we're Talk. We'll have a diesel generator because we're old school. But my point is that we all want to save the planet. The issue, no one else is doing net zero apart from collapsing European democracies, and therefore you will save money. The small matter of selling oil and gas to the rest of the world once we drill, baby, drill.
Well, I think we should. I absolutely think we should do that, and I think North Sea oil is great, and we should utilise it. It's an amazing asset, but also net zero or something towards net zero is the future, and that's actually, we can take a technological lead. The interesting thing about China, because whenever people talk about net zero, they say it's not worth bothering because look at what China's emitting. China's also the world leader in renewable energy technology.
It is.
Yeah. And
they've got a lot of electric cars.
Yeah, and if we embraced that more and actually invested in it and saw it as a strategic asset,
most
then
of it was. So
that's
we
what
gave
we're
it away.
That's what we're doing. I mean, I'm surprised. Listen, you talk an awful lot of sense, Andy, and I think you're much too right wing for the Labour Party. And I think actually,
the Labour Party's too left wing for me.
Well, that could be. I've got a gazillion viewers and listeners who voted for Tony Blair 3 times, who now back.
Absolutely,
Farage.
I would have done if I could have done.
It's a very interesting thing, and so bottom line though is that the public want change. I think what you get with reform is perhaps a flawed project, but you have 2 things: better policies and political will to deliver them.
What can you give me one reform economic policy, because I don't know any of them?
Well, I agree with you. That is the soft underbelly of the reform.
Yeah, they don't have a single economic
And
policy.
I'll also give you the fact that old Nigel and Jenrick, Captain Loyalty, Robert Jenrick, had a disagreement on the day of the launch this week about the 2-child benefit cap, because he said we can't afford it. Well, what Jenrick said is we're going to have to keep it because the country's broke. And Nigel said, I still want to get rid of it, but the Tory press won't let me. So it's definitely going to be. No. It's going to be bumpy.
The interesting
but could it be worse than this, Peter
Yes,
Barnes?
it can, because you have to.
How is that possible?
Because I go back to the Rudy Giuliani quote. He says, "Change is merely the vehicle to which you drive to get to where you're going." You can keep saying change, 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 but it's where you're going that matters. And this is where we fell for Keir Starmer, because he kept saying that word and he kept doing the same things that Nigel Farage is doing. Because I made the comparison, they don't half sound very similar at times. Because I do think that they lack that actual end point about where are we going. I don't think there is a solid ideological vision behind reform, because as Andy rightly says, they are bound by what they don't like, not by what they do. So the big reason you've had all these splits is it's because it's how far do you go on issues such as immigration, on the economy, how far do you go? That's where the real splits are. It's not that there's any great ideological difference between these 3 groups. It's actually now it's the degree to which they want to implement our policy, and reform have been caught short simply because they've not been put under any pressure for some time, because obviously the Labour Party is collapsing. The Tories have just been it's like punching downwards really for them at the moment. So now you've actually got a real credible movement. I know there's parties and all the rest of it, but I say there's a large chunk of the right that now don't like Nigel because of what he's done with reform. You promised the world, he's delivered half, if not a quarter of it, and unfortunately that's why these splits happen.
You sound like a pair of deluded old ladies. This is like a mother's meeting we're having on the radio. Chris says, I see you got Waldorf and Statler on the show this morning. 2 fools. Nathan, get these Muppets off the radio. What a pair of wokies. How about this from Gary? Come and poll the red wall. You'll see a big difference in popularity. Nigel will poll a lot higher than any other leader. Tell Andy he was far better as a crooner than a political commentator. You might have heard that before. Jane's not happy. Andy Williams is delusional. If he thinks the only reason people dislike the Labour Party is Starmer, most people can't stand any of them. June says, Mark, your guest says reform are only popular with people who listen to talk. Wrong. Just got back from my holiday, met people from all over the country. They all say the same as me. He obviously hasn't moved out of London and the Champagne Socialists. Maggie, can you tell Andy, keep on believing. Nigel is head and shoulders above Starmer any day of the week. I'll be honest with you, a reform government, it could be a hot mess. It could be a catastrophe. It could be a nightmare on wheels. The issue we've got, the country's in crisis, Andy, isn't it? And what we need is a brave politician with political will. Look at Farage. He's got a pair of balls on him, hasn't he? For example, he was early to the boats issue, standing at Dover a decade ago, being called far right because of the illegal crossings. He's been vindicated. Every political party now focused on stopping the boats, at least nominally. Early to the madness of net zero, early to the debanking scandal, this guy is ahead of every single argument, and he's brave.
Well, the debanking scandal he took a sudden interest in when he himself was debanked. Yeah. But aside from that, I mean, I think where I agree with you is that we do need brave, bold, and actually radical leadership. One thing I massively disagree with Keir Starmer on and disagree with Kemi Badenoch on, but agree with Nigel Farage on, is that I actually do think the country is fundamentally broken in all sorts of ways.
Right.
In all sorts of ways. But I don't agree with Nigel Farage's prescription, his solution. You know, his biggest political achievement, in huge inverted commas, and I know people are bored of hearing about it, but is Brexit, right? We all know that Brexit probably wouldn't have happened if it wasn't for him. And Brexit has been, on every single observable measure, a disaster.
It's been an extraordinary triumph.
You know it hasn't been, and nobody can give you a single
I'm blown away by how good it's been.
I'm going to disagree with you.
I can't believe how good Brexit's been.
Because I actually think the problem has been the implementation of Brexit and not the concept of Brexit itself. I think that is the fine line and the difference that you have to split.
If we let's accept that's true for a second, which I don't agree with, but let's accept it is true. Well, surely if you're the man who is the driving force behind it, you should play some role.
Oh no, don't get me wrong.
Delivering its success.
He disappeared because he was a political opportunist in the finest order.
Absolutely. And what I think is really interesting is you talked about sort of Tory reform pact potentially. I wouldn't be surprised if that happens, and actually if that does happen, the government will be a disaster, because we know that any government involving reform will be a disaster. And you know what will happen? Everyone in reform will blame the fact that the Tories were involved. We weren't right-wing enough. It's exactly this, and I know this because as a member of the Labour Party who comes from, in my view, the sensible wing of the Labour Party, I've seen what happens when you have people who say, if we were just a bit more radical, bit more extreme, bit more left-wing, everything would be fine, which is the massive danger we have with this Labour government. It will be the same with reform, and that's why we've got Rupert Lowe's absurd party and all of this. It's because people say, no, more extreme, more extreme, more extreme.
Well, I love to find a landing point, and I agree with you. This is insane to say, but I'd rather keep Starmer now than have a replacement, because I think that if he's replaced by Angela Rayner or Ed Miliband, be afraid, be very afraid. I'm going to campaign on the show to keep Starmer, because honestly, folks, be careful what you wish for. Listen, so much to get through. Brilliant to have my guests here. We're having a lot of fun and we're dropping a few truth bombs. What do you think about this? Are they right that a reform government will be a hot mess? It's the subject of today's Dolan's Dispatch in 20 minutes' time. But what do you think? Is there a problem with Nigel? Would reform be worse than Labour? This is Talk Breakfast.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
8:41, you're listening to Talk Breakfast. Reform UK, are they Britain's only answer, is my question to you. Yvonne, Mark, you put Peter Barnes on the reform side of the argument, but he does nothing but criticise Nigel at every opportunity. He always does this. Boring, says Yvonne. What about this from Nathan? Two people that want to join the Tories. Can you tell these idiots they won't join the Tories? Linda, Mark, didn't Cameron disappear when he lost the Brexit vote? Plus Boris didn't let Nigel implement Brexit. Thank you for that. And we'll get to more of your feedback in just a moment. But let's take a little bit of a voice note. This is from Kevin regarding reform. Have we played that yet? No, let's have that. Take a listen.
Morning, Mark. Another Sunday, another bunch of people on your show slagging off Nigel Farage and Reform. I get fed up with it. Predominantly, it's not fair because you always bring a left and a righty on. And the right is always Peter Barnes, who I think is an amazing commentator. I really love him, but he always slags off Reform. He's never got a nice thing to say about them. And so you always have two people slagging off Reform. And there's only you that should be neutral defending them in any way. I don't think Nigel's perfect, no. I don't think he'll get everything done that he sets out to do, far from it. But at least he'll try. At least he'll actually try to get some of it done. He's been banging on about these things, for some of them, for 20-odd years. Like, give him a chance. He's the only one who's in the chance to actually get into government. But it's just every Sunday, he just gets bashed on your show. 3 Sundays running now you've done this, and it's just not on.
I know, Kev, listen, you're right, and I'm tempted just to fire Peter Barnes. Right?
Wow.
So, Peter, do you know what I'm going to do?
Well,
right?
actually, do you know what? I'm going to counteract that, and I actually think that Reform deserve a whole load of congratulations for actually turning around the local elections and getting that vote back on. If it wasn't for Reform UK, we would still not have these local elections. I think they deserve all the credit for this, and my thing with Reform is always, I want them to be better, so if they can't beat me, just imagine what the blob is going to be like.
Most definitely. What I'll do, Kev, we'll get a pro-reform voice on. We love having Andy. We've got to have Andy. We've got to have Peter, because I think he's a very compelling chap to listen to, right about a lot of things. And we'll get a reformer on as well, because, Kev, I love the feedback. Thank you for that. You are right. I'm outnumbered today, and I'm not even the cheerleader for Reforge. There's a Freudian slip. Can I get, lads, before our next break, I want to get to a story. I don't know if you've been briefed, but I'll give you the inside track and our viewers and listeners as well. A senior police detective who was among the first responding to the London Tower Bridge terror attacks has been sacked for using the word pikey in messages sent about Gypsy, Roma and traveller people. So you've got the headline, award-winning police detective, one of the first on the scene of the London Bridge terror attacks, sacked for joking about travellers on WhatsApp. Now, Peter, it's not language I would use, pikey. It's offensive. And I'd like to apologise for anyone offended by my use of that word. I'll stop saying it now, but at least we know the context. This is a private WhatsApp group. This is a guy that ran towards danger at a time of terror. 8 people killed, 48 injured. He goes there in a cop car. He's now out of work. What's your reaction?
It doesn't really matter what kind of police officer he was, what he's been involved in. This is just a matter of fact that we have yet to define private and public. We don't know where the line is, and I do think this is absolutely egregious, because I just point to what happened at the West Midlands Police, and with basically they authorised a Jew hunt, and this is what that guy gets punished, but the other one gets to walk away with a pension and a pat on the back. I'm not being funny. Where is the kind of standards that we are holding the people to in the public sector? I do feel for this particular police officer. It's not language I would like to use, but we've all said things, we've all had things taken out of context. Of course we have. However, I do feel like this was a private WhatsApp group. It's nobody's business. If there was evidence that these opinions had affected his work, that's a very different situation. But there doesn't seem to be any of that. So, yeah, I have to admit, I think this is wrong on so many counts, but it's not the first time we've seen this. And, yeah, we have to have some level of accountability in the public sector. But coming down on this officer while you're letting, much senior officers away with a lot worse, it doesn't look right.
Andy?
Well, firstly, and most importantly, I think people need to realise that if they put stuff on WhatsApp, it might get leaked. Like, have you not heard of screenshots? I mean, politicians don't seem to understand this, and they're putting private stuff. There is no such thing as private on WhatsApp or on any other messaging platform like that. So if you're a public servant and you're using language like that, well, actually, maybe it does affect how you do your job.
But is it a win for a man that runs towards terrorists?
I don't think that's relevant.
No,
it's completely irrelevant.
I do.
Why?
Because I think that it's disproportionate. So politically incorrect casual slur versus running towards terrorists, then for me, on balance of evidence, he stays.
But what you're suggesting there is that somebody who did their job really well a number of years ago should be held to a less high standard. Why?
Yes, that's exactly what I think. I think he should be held to a less...
Really?
No. The bottom line is I don't think any cop should be fired for intemperate, politically incorrect language.
Look, it does seem heavy-handed. It absolutely does.
Because I don't think it was... I've got traveller friends. It's not a nice... It's a slur. It's obnoxious. I don't think it's what you would frame as darkly racist.
No, I think there are greater sins.
I don't know. I don't really like to put minorities in hierarchies. I think if we have slurs...
No, but what about language?
But it's the same. It's the same argument, because basically you're saying that one word is worse than another, despite the fact that they are using the same kind of weapon, basically. But I happen to agree that it doesn't really matter whether he was a really good police officer or just an average one. It is the principle of the fact that we have to draw a solid line between what is public and what is private.
Can I say something about what I think is more interesting? Which paper was this in today?
This is a report in the Mail.
In the Mail, yeah, that
and the Guardian.
Okay, fine, but it's very Mail, because the reason this story has been published is because the press are trying to make a bigger point, and what they're really saying, the undertone is, actually it should be fine to use this horrible language. That's what they really mean, and that's why you see stories time and time again. It says so-and-so was sacked for doing this one really terrible thing. I mean, it reminds me of, and I've said this on air before, I'm going to get a lot of hatred on Twitter after I say this, but this is why I think Lucy Connolly absolutely deserved to go to prison, because we can't just give people a blank check to say whatever they like.
See, the problem is, we tried it the other way.
Sorry, by the way, on Lucy Connolly, you know, not only was she then, were people apologising for her, she's been feted as some sort of, like, hero. It's weird.
That is odd.
Yeah, the hero worship I don't particularly like, but I will say we tried it the other way. But the problem is when you put boundaries in and lines, the problem is nobody ever agrees where the line is. Everybody has a different concept of where the line. So the idea of hate crime legislation has not worked, because by the metrics that we use, it's gone through the roof. So if you're using the law to punish people, to stamp out bad behaviour, then it's not worked. So why do we keep it? It doesn't make any sense.
I've had actually a crazy idea. I wonder whether the landing spot here is he shouldn't say that, it is racist, and actually when you ask me about a hierarchy of words, no racist word is acceptable. How about this? It's so crazy. Why doesn't the boss sit him down and go, don't use that language, and, you know, have a word and let the guy reflect and maybe realise, okay, do you know something, the world's changed, you don't say that word. Because I'll be honest, in the 70s, using that word wasn't just not acceptable. It wasn't just acceptable, it featured on sitcoms. Yeah. So, you know, so maybe wouldn't that be the point for the boss to sit him down and just say, it was wrong what you did there, and he can apologise and get on with his life and keep Britain's streets safe?
Maybe, but I think it comes back to that hierarchy question. And actually, if it was a different racial slur, I think we'd all be saying throw the book at him.
Yeah. I don't know,
I actually agree. But to answer your question, the problem is, unfortunately, there's somebody with a lanyard that needs a job, so therefore that's why we have to have these.
Well, this is it. And my problem is that, and we can all agree, I don't like the language, but my concern is that he's going to go and he'll be replaced by someone that doesn't know what a woman is, or wants to take the knee at BLM, or who dances with a rainbow flag at the Pride March, which sees lesbians escorted away by cops because there are blokes in dresses that believe they've got better human rights. How about this from lovely Kate has left a voice note about that.
Morning, Mark. Kate from the Wirral, currently on Anglesey, out walking the dogs. My question about the sacking of this police officer on a private WhatsApp group. Who dubbed him in? What kind of person would do that? Surely they are supposed to be his friends on that group. That's the question that springs to my mind.
Do you know what? That hadn't occurred to me. Thank you for that, Kate. I think this conversation is going to carry on, and I think it's an important discussion on a variety of levels about political correctness, controlling people's language. Does that make us safer that this guy is no longer a serving police officer? And also the idea of private messages as well. So much to get through. Folks, we are going to keep this going. It is 8:51. You're listening to Talk Breakfast.
breaking news in the last couple of moments. Extraordinary news. The police have arrested Andrew Mountbatten Windsor. It's his 66th birthday today. What a birthday present that is.
Mr. Mandarin, how long do you think that you can stay on the island?
We're going to stay forever. Our rights have to be respected now. We're going to stay.
Do you expect Jeremy Clarkson to become a part of your new party?
I can tell you, if Jeremy Clarkson decided to darken my doorstep, I would be absolutely delighted.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Fiona says, good morning, Mark. Andy, a message to Andy. I'm Fiona. I'm a woman. I find it offensive, the creation and use of cis woman. Should these people lose their jobs or be sent to prison as well? Chris in Newbury, Mark, your two guests show why reform is the only answer. They give the illusion they're on the left and the right, but they are hairs width apart on the way that they think and what we should all think. They were indoctrinated by the Uni Party and spout safe space arguments fed by the machine. Well, Chris not happy there. Listen, folks, I'll get to more of your feedback. Maybe just this from Steve, who says, good morning, Mark. What if that policeman who's lost his job for offensive words on WhatsApp, what if he'd been sacked before the London Bridge thing? More would have probably been killed. As for using that word, deserved a written warning at the most, or some advice and guidance. This is all by design for us to self-censor and to remain afraid. Thank you very much for that, Steve. Andy, the former Prime Minister Boris Johnson wants boots on the ground in Ukraine. What say you?
Well, I think we need to do whatever it takes to keep Ukraine safe and to prevent any similar invasion happening again. And that's why we're going to have to up our defence spending and not just talk about it, but genuinely do it and find savings to fund that as a country. We have to be honest about that. If it means boots on the ground to deter Russia, then I think, I don't think we want to be sending, no one wants to be sending soldiers into harm's way, but you can't trust Putin, even if a deal is done, even if Donald Trump sort of solves this problem in inverted commas. Putin, for as long as he lives, is always going to want to come back for more. And so if having boots on the ground, I don't think it should just be Britain, but if there is some cooperation with our German friends and our French friends and maybe the Americans as well, collectively, this is about not just Ukraine security, but our security, European security.
Well, I mean, that's a question, isn't it, Peter, why my viewers and listeners should send their kids into the line of fire to protect a country many miles away?
Because unfortunately you have to, because they don't stop.
Yeah.
Russia won't stop. This is the great thing that you have to remember, is that you have to put a line. You have to draw a line and go no further. This is why it's the famous quote. Because, unfortunately, Andy's right, that Putin, well, for as long as he lives, will continue to advance and advance. So you have to actually put him down. And we're not brave enough to say that. However, I disagree with Boris Johnson on this one, because you might as well send the troops in with their own body bag. They are that poorly equipped, that poorly trained. They lost to Ukrainian forces in a NATO exercise just 2 weeks ago. That was like a huge battalion of our troops. We lost to Ukrainian troops who have been fighting actual war. And I cannot stress to people just the state of our armed forces and the degradation and the frank dishonour that we've put on these people, because it would be negligent to send them into a war zone at this moment in time. We are not a credible partner of NATO. We shouldn't be a part of NATO at the minute. We are nothing but a passenger who's getting a little antsy about the music choice. But that's the reality of it. And Donald Trump is perfectly right and well within his rights to start rearranging this relationship, because it is not a friendship, it's a partnership. We bring something, Americans bring something, and unfortunately our side is somewhat lacking in any credibility about being able to even have a basic aircraft and armed forces.
Next up, Mail on Sunday exclusive. Email proves King Charles was warned about his brother's secret deals. This is courtesy of our Talk international editor Isabel Oakeshott and the excellent Glenn Owen. King Charles was warned as long ago as 2019 that the royal family's name was being abused by Andrew Mountbatten Windsor's business associations. In a bombshell email, a whistleblower told the palace that the former Duke had secret financial links to controversial millionaire financier David Rowland. The story here, Andy, appears to be that it may have been on the King's radar that Andrew was brokering these secret deals. If Charles knew more than he's letting on, must he abdicate?
I think that's maybe a little bit extreme. I actually just don't think that's what the country needs. I think one of the great... I'm not like an ardent monarchist, but I think that one of the good things about having a head of state who's not elected is that you have that natural stability. So I don't think abdication would be a good thing. But the idea that nobody in the royal family knew what Andrew was up to for all these years is absolute nonsense. He has been in plain sight for years, grifting, he's desperately trying to coin it wherever he goes. Everyone knew that on these trade missions, what he was actually doing was trying to line his own pockets. And so any idea that Charles didn't know that. And by the way, the clearest evidence we have that the royal family knew something dodgy was going on is that they literally gave him £12 million to pay someone off.
Well, that's it, Peter. What do you think? Is the king in trouble?
I think he should abdicate, if I'm being brutally honest, because if his name is anywhere near this, it's never going to go away. I actually think he needs to go. William come in, and they can hopefully start a new line. But I don't think the royal family are going to ever shake this off.
Lads, I wish we had longer. Thanks to Andy and Peter. We'll see you soon. Next up, Dolan's Dispatch.
Just breaking news in the last couple of moments. Extraordinary news. Not just that the police have arrived at the Sandringham estate where Prince Andrew, as was now Andrew Mountbatten Windsor, is currently living since being thrown out of the Windsor estate. The police have arrested Andrew Mountbatten Windsor. It's an extraordinary revelation and development on this story involving the Epstein files and all the allegations that have been swirling around about Andrew over the many years, from Virginia Giuffre, now sadly deceased, and since then, and certainly what's been contained in the Epstein files as released in the last few weeks. But the police have arrived at Sandringham estate this morning, where Andrew has made his new home. It's his 66th birthday today. What a birthday present that is. He has been arrested by the police. Of course, the brother of the current king, the second son of our late Queen Elizabeth. This is an extraordinary development. Those of us who've been talking an awful lot about establishment cover-ups and lack of, should we say, interest by the police in what are very, very serious allegations against Andrew. Perhaps pleased that that pressure has finally been put on the police, and they have done the job of actually looking into these issues seriously. Must bear in mind, of course, that the Prince has not been charged with any crime at this point, and he has always denied any wrongdoing in relation to any of the allegations about him. We'll give you more on that. We'll talk to you about that throughout the show, but I'm just being told that the arrest has been on suspicion of misconduct in public office. This, of course, relates to those Epstein file allegations and the documents that, if they are true, would suggest that he had, it is alleged, passed on basically what was confidential government information when he was the UK trade envoy for this country for 10 years to Jeffrey Epstein for Jeffrey Epstein's financial gain. Just breaking news in the last couple of moments. Extraordinary news. Not just that the police have arrived at the Sandringham estate where Prince Andrew, as was now Andrew Mountbatten Windsor, is currently living since being thrown out of the Windsor estate. The police have arrested Andrew Mountbatten Windsor. It's an extraordinary revelation and development on this story involving the Epstein files and all the allegations that have been swirling around about Andrew over the many years, from Virginia Giuffre, now sadly deceased, and since then, and certainly what's been contained in the Epstein files as released in the last few weeks. But the police have arrived at Sandringham estate this morning, where Andrew has made his new home. It's his 66th birthday today. What a birthday present that is. He has been arrested by the police. Of course, the brother of the current king, the second son of our late Queen Elizabeth. This is an extraordinary development. Those of us who've been talking an awful lot about establishment cover-ups and lack of, should we say, interest by the police in what are very, very serious allegations against Andrew. Perhaps pleased that that pressure has finally been put on the police, and they have done the job of actually looking into these issues seriously. Must bear in mind, of course, that the Prince has not been charged with any crime at this point, and he has always denied any wrongdoing in relation to any of the allegations about him. We'll give you more on that. We'll talk to you about that throughout the show, but I'm just being told that the arrest has been on suspicion of misconduct in public office. This, of course, relates to those Epstein file allegations and the documents that, if they are true, would suggest that he had, it is alleged, passed on basically what was confidential government information when he was the UK trade envoy for this country for 10 years to Jeffrey Epstein for Jeffrey Epstein's financial gain.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Well, I hope that was worth the wait. 9:05, Talk Breakfast. Happy Sunday, one and all. I hope you're very well. A very big hour to come. Breaking this morning, Nigel Farage stranded in the ocean as his efforts to bring aid and medical supplies to the 4 residents of the Chagos Islands are thwarted. The British authorities don't want Farage to land on this disputed territory, even though it's British soil. So what about Chagos? Can this hated deal to give away British territory at a cost of £35 billion be stopped? We've got the inside story. Donald Trump's tariffs nightmare could be a problem for Rachel from Accounts. Is Britain heading for a recession? And an exclusive in the Mail on Sunday, courtesy of Talk's international editor. Email proves Charles was warned about his brother's secret deals. If the king knew more than he's letting on, does he fall? My number is 0344 499 1000. Text the word TALK and your message to 87222. Leave us a voice note, and as the saying goes, let's talk. And we start, as ever, at this time every Friday and Saturday and Sunday with Dolan's Dispatch. No more Mr. Nice Guy. With a characteristic disdain for convention, Nigel Farage this week introduced the key members of what he called his shadow cabinet. But it was Farage himself that cast the longest shadow. A glittering new team unveiled by someone who, let's be honest, isn't much of a team player. Amid the smiles and scripted missives from his underlings, even on stage, Farage was happy to remind his colleagues that it's his way or the highway. And every speech from the others was laced with dutiful North Korea-like nods to the boss, which I think is no bad thing. This is a party shaped exclusively in the mould of its leader. Britain may be a democracy, but Reform UK most definitely is not. Now, Tuesday's ceremony unveiling this shadow cabinet wasn't about Suella Braverman, it wasn't about Zia Youssef, Robert Jenrick or Richard Tice. As always, it was the Nigel Show. And we're going to see this unapologetically presidential approach continue in number 10 if British politics' troublemaker-in-chief wins power. That's right. A Nigel Farage premiership will be presidential, which I think is no bad thing. You see, Nigel Farage has watched the second term of his friend Trump very carefully, and his brutal dispatching at this event this week of an FT journalist who was asking about the private education of those on stage. Well, Nigel Farage's response was ruthless, and it was vintage Donald. And unburdened by the pesky constraints of internal party politics, we will see Prime Minister Farage make every effort to govern like Donald Trump if he's given the chance. Policy, personnel, delivery and messaging will all be on Nigel's terms. And what that means is that for the first time since Margaret Thatcher, who, let's be honest, had more than a presidential heir herself, we will have a PM in Farage that has only a passing interest in being popular. And let me explain why that's a good thing. It's worth remembering, and I know Nigel Farage and I've known him for years, it's worth remembering that Nigel Farage has never held particularly strong ambitions to become Prime Minister. It was only an 11th hour change of heart that saw him wrestle the leadership from the hands of Richard Tice just a few short months prior to the July 2024 general election. Nigel Farage has never been particularly obsessed with becoming Prime Minister, which makes him a great candidate to become Prime Minister. As a born disruptor, Farage seeks consequence more than power. World King, the dream, of course, of Boris Johnson, is a position that Nigel could take or leave. Nigel already enjoys the legacy of Brexit, the legacy of exposing the scandal of the debanking situation, and the legacy of fatally wounding the Conservative Party. So with the keys to power, the focus in Farage's mind won't be power for power's sake. He's not that fussed about being Prime Minister. He seeks consequence over power. No, his focus will be to change the country for the better in his own mind. That's why he called the party Reform. And his reign in office, if it comes off, will likely be brutal. Broken eggs will not be mourned in the making of this omelette. Nigel Farage's main premise is right. Britain is broken. With porous borders, an eye-wateringly expensive energy supply, bloated and wasteful public services, crumbling infrastructure, irredeemably woke institutions, and an economy on life support, Nigel Farage will gleefully administer 5 years of tough love. And if you don't like it, tough luck. So maybe that's what we need. Nigel Farage, who I know well, he may be charming, but let me tell you, he's got an inner steel. And getting on the wrong side of this man is a lonely and uncomfortable place to be. Nigel Farage is a man of strong will and thick skin, and he will take no prisoners if he wins office. Nigel Farage is a countercultural figure. He pushes against the grain. Early to call out the small boats crisis. Early to call out the mindless, suicidal profligacy of net zero. Early to call out our needless membership of the sclerotic EU. Early, but ultimately right. If he wins power, he may not win friends, and that won't bother him, and may in fact drive him forward. His appetite for unpopularity is a rare political superpower that Thatcher had in abundance. He will lead by conviction, and ruthlessly so. It won't be pretty, it may not even be fun, but desperate times call for desperate measures. And as with Churchill in 1940, and arguably Trump in America in 2024, unconventional characters who aren't perfect, who are deeply flawed, who have got a big ego, who don't play by the rules, very often these figures come to the fore at a time of national crisis. That may be the moment in our national story. Britain has tried every other option to date. Perhaps now it's time for the nasty party after all. 9:13 Talk Breakfast. David is in Gloucestershire. Good morning, David.
Good morning, Mark. How are we all?
I'm very well. Nigel Farage is not a perfect human being by any stretch. There is a soft underbelly in their economic policy. There are too many egos at the top. But I just wonder whether this is the final roll of the dice for the UK and this could be the moment. What do you think?
Well, we hope you're right. But what I said to your producer earlier, you were chatting to the chap, I can't think of his name, the chap you had on very first
Peter
thing
Barnes.
this morning.
The
right.
Duncan Barks.
Duncan Barks, right, yeah. And he was saying about convincing people to trust reform. And my point I was trying to make very much so is it's this trust issue with politicians across the board. We have been told lie after lie after lie after lie. You know, stop the boats, crash the gangs, everything, Boris Johnson, Brexit, it's an oven-ready deal, every politician that's come along has lied and lied and lied to get into power, and once they're in power, manifestos get ripped up, and off they go. Right, we don't care. We're in power now. We're here for 5 years. We don't give a damn.
Yeah. Do you remember immigration tens of thousands, David?
Oh, yes. I've been voting since I was 18, or when I was trying to work out when I first voted. I don't think I ever voted for Margaret Thatcher. I think John Major was the first Prime Minister I ever voted for, was trying to work that one out. But I was certainly about when she was about, and all the way through, and you've voted all the way through, and every time they have lied and lied. I didn't vote for Tony Blair. I saw him on television just before the election, and everybody was going, they've had enough, because it was a very similar situation. They'd had 14 years or however long it had been of Tories, and everybody went, we need a change. In came Tony Blair, swam on the telly, and they were interviewing him, and they turned around and they said something along the lines of, what are you going to do about the crime? I'll know when I get in. What are you going to do about the economy?
Yeah.
I'll know when I get in. What are you going to do about defence? I'll know when I get in. And I thought, you're an absolute two-faced liar. And I was proved right then. And I worry, and I was proved right about Starmer. And I did vote for Boris. I would never vote Labour, Lib, Green. But I am worried about reform. I am a reform member. And I am worried, and I could very, very easily flip back to the Conservatives. Very, very easy. And I hope I'm right with reform, but I do worry. I wouldn't vote Advance and Restore, or whatever they're calling themselves this week, and I think that is completely wrong about Restore. I think it's too close to Reform, and name-wise, and I think they will pick up votes by mistake, and I think it is... Yeah. Something that needs to be sorted out one way or the other. I don't know how you can go about it legally or whatever, but I do think they do sound too far. What they were talking the other day is too far, right? Was basically saying even if you're born here but you're not the right colour or shade or whatever, we're going to export you. And you think, yeah, that is too far. That is way too far, and I think I'm a bit... I can be a bit extreme, but even that is way too off my ladder.
David, I completely agree with you. That is not acceptable. To be fair, David, I don't think that Restore and Rupert Lowe are on record as having that position, but of course you're entitled to your view, and it's certainly going to split the vote on the right, which surely only helps Starmer. David, go and have an outstanding Sunday. We'll catch up soon. Big Jeff is in Hastings. Jeff, Nigel Farage is not perfect. He's a diva. Reform is not a democracy, but surely it's our only hope now.
Yeah, good morning, Mark. Am I on the air, by the way?
You are on the air, and I want you to drop me a few truth bombs if you can. I want you to make trouble for me this morning, Jeff. Come on.
You've spoke to me before. I'm a man on fire. You know the one.
Yeah.
Now, look, it all seems to be getting out of hand, and I'm slowly losing my confidence in everything, all the parties and it. With what's been going on, Mark.
I know.
I think I can't handle it, but at the same time, we've got to clutch at Nigel Farage as the last straw. It may be a thicker straw than before, but that is our only hope, because we can all see the trail that we're going down at the moment. And as I said to your man on the phone a couple of weeks ago, it will end, but how will it end? I mean, everything bad has got to come to an end, and there's got to be a change. Now, the one thing I did want to say to you is that if Nigel Farage gets in, and I will vote for him because, as I say, he's my last hope, they've got to make up a contract where all his promises are on paper, and if he doesn't follow them, then he can be out. There's got to be a contract like there is in work. People out there...
It's a good idea.
You know, and it's got to be a contract, because Keir Starmer, my roads round here, I need an 8x8, not a 4x4 because of the roads.
Yeah, I know.
You know, and he said he promised doing the roads. And if you can't cover a minimal thing of that promise, regardless of the rest of it, then he's a total he's an out and out liar. I mean, the Chagos Islands, I'm all for the people. Get back there and get your land back. There's a lot of dodgy dealings, and anyone listening, we all know what's going on, fellas, you know, girls. And your lady this morning, the blonde-haired, I can't think of her name. Is it Mrs. Oakley?
Isabel Oakeshott, yeah.
She is fantastic. And you know what? For talkTV, you're not going to get a gold Oscar. You're going to get a platinum Oscar, because you're the greatest show I've ever listened to. And I've never listened to the news much, but you've got me, hooked on it, you know?
Well, Jeff, there is no talk without you and without our army of viewers and listeners. This place exists as a platform for your concerns, your opinions, your views, and it's always welcome. Jeff, I wish I had longer, especially now that you're being nice to me, but call me again soon. The clock's against... Well, your final thought? I know you want to say something else, Jeff. You get the last word here. Go for it.
Just thank you for everything. And like I say, last straw, Nigel Farage, you've got to go for it, because that's all there is left. The little bit of hope in the Pandora's box. If that don't work, I'll be coming and sleeping on your sofa, Mark, all right?
That is beautifully put. You're always welcome, let me tell you. There's room at the inn, Jeff. We'll have a beer as well. Jeff in Hastings.
Absolutely.
Thank you for your kind... Top man. Well, exactly. Jeff, we'll catch up soon. Listen, brilliant. And thanks to you, Jeff, for your very kind words. It's all about opinions. We don't all think the same things, but what we do agree is the country's broke. How do we fix it? More to come. Next up, one of the most respected former newspaper editors in the country. Don't go anywhere.
Breaking news in the last couple of moments. Extraordinary news. The police have arrested Andrew Mountbatten Windsor. It's his 66th birthday today. What a birthday present that is.
Mr. Mandarin, how long do you think that you can stay on the island?
We're going to stay forever. Our rights have to be respected now. We're going to stay.
Do you expect Jeremy Clarkson to become a part of your new party?
I can tell you, if Jeremy Clarkson decided to darken my doorstep, I would be absolutely delighted.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Why is Farage in the Chagos Islands when there are more important issues in the UK, says John. He's getting more like Starmer every day. Lots of responses to Dolan's dispatch. Ben in London, Mark, your Dolan's dispatch was extremely well presented today. It's made me feel better hearing it. Time to bring back Britishness and make our country great again. Let's have a look. Mark says, an unnamed texter, your Dolan's dispatch was spot on. Your character assessment of Nigel Farage, and that alone is why he must be PM to force the changes to acquire the consequences before handing it over to a more democratic party. I'm a Thatcher boy, and Nigel does without doubt remind me of the great lady. However, H isn't happy. Very clever, Dolan. I see you, but that was the biggest pile of plagiarised BS you've ever spouted. Listen, let me tell you, you're entitled to your view, and oh my goodness, I'm no stranger to getting things wrong. 9:23, live in the studio, a man that's never wrong is David Wooding, of course, former editor of the Sunday Express newspaper, one of the legends of Fleet Street. Good morning, David.
Good morning, Mark.
Of course, you are now a columnist and leader writer at the Sun newspaper. Lovely to have you with us in the studio. We'll get to politics, which is your area of expertise, but we have to talk about the royal family and Andrew Mountbatten Windsor. Front page news in the Mail on Sunday. Email proves Charles was warned about his brother's secret deals. This is courtesy of our international editor, Isabel Oakeshott, and Glenn Owen, who I'm sure you know well. King Charles was warned as long ago as 2019, that the royal family's name was being abused by Andrew Mountbatten Windsor's business associations. What do you make of this story?
Well, the plot thickens every day, Mark, on this one. I mean, it all dates back, strangely enough, the first story about this was on a paper I used to work for 15 years ago this week. The News of the World had that picture on the front page of Prince Andrew, as he was then, walking with Epstein. And that started the whole ball rolling.
Was that in New York when he claimed that he was saying goodbye to him? He had to fly to America to cancel his friend.
Yeah, and that was 15 years ago, and it's going. And there are fears today in some of the stories in the newspapers that this is going to drag on even longer, that the royal family should bring out their dead effectively, let everything come out there because they've lost control of this story. The police... 7, 11, I don't know how many police forces there are now, 7 or 11.
Yeah.
They're the figures you're hearing, are investigating it. Gordon Brown has come out now and saying he has sent 5-page letters, which the contents of which he refuses to divulge, to 5 police forces. And he's saying, look at the RAF. Let's get some details from the RAF, the Ministry of Defence, the Department for Trade. He must know something, and when Gordon is angry, he's not a man you don't want to get talking against you, and he is going for this in a big way. He clearly feels that he's been betrayed in some way by Prince Andrew, or Andrew Mountbatten Windsor, as he's now called, and he's out to get him for sure.
Most definitely, and the allegation that RAF jets were used by the former Prince Andrew to meet Jeffrey Epstein. I mean, there's so much, of course, it's worth stressing that Andrew denies all of the allegations that face him, some of which have ramped up in their seriousness, particularly the allegation of misconduct in public office, which is why he was arrested and questioned. My thought on this, David, is the damage is done for Andrew now. His reputation has been destroyed. He's lost his titles, and he'll see out his years either on the Sandringham estate or at His Majesty's pleasure in jail.
Yes.
But the problem goes beyond Andrew, doesn't it, reputationally? If the King was across some of Andrew's activities, that presents him with a political problem.
Absolutely. And this is why I think the palace are now trying to get on the front foot on this one. I often wondered over the last couple of weeks about the timing of the King cutting his ties with his brother. Was he alerted by police that perhaps something was going to move and he had to remove him from the royal family
because it was very abrupt, wasn't it?
Absolutely.
Was it the autumn of last year?
It was.
Around October.
Or was he aware that there was an investigation taking place? Did he see some information which gave him fear that this was going to develop into a big storm and therefore decided to cut him loose. Now, of course, that's not proving enough, because already the government is saying they're going to remove Andrew as 8th in line to the throne, and that's becoming an irresistible move. 82% of the population say he should be removed from the crown, from the line of succession. So, yes, it's a big problem for the royal family. The other thing as well, Mark, is our much beloved late Queen Elizabeth II. She is now possibly going to have her legacy tarnished in some way, because there are stories about her protecting Andrew, because whether rightly or wrongly, he was seen to be her favourite son. We don't know whether that's right or not, but that is a big story that's going round. And in the wash, when all this comes out, what role did she play in protecting Andrew is going to be one of the questions that will be asked.
And it's been reported that William, the Prince of Wales, wanted more robust treatment of Andrew, going back as far as 2020, when, of course, a cheque was written to the tune of a reported £12 million for an out-of-court settlement with Andrew's sex accuser, Virginia Giuffre. Now, it's amazing, isn't it, the writing of that cheque did not raise more questions within royal circles as to what Andrew was up to. That might have been the point where he lost his Duke of York title and his status as prince.
Absolutely, and it's a substantial amount of money, and people ask the question, was there smoke without fire? Quite rightly, and yes, he's paid her off, but already her family, now she's obviously she's died, she killed herself, and her family are now coming out saying we still want more justice.
And this Mail on Sunday exclusive predates the writing of that cheque in 2020. Yeah. This is 2019. And it's all about how much the King knew. Now, I've had the finest royal experts on the show this week on Talk Breakfast, David, and I defer to their knowledge and experience in regard to these royal matters. But I think actually we've crossed the Rubicon. And I think that we're in an area now which is unprecedented territory for the royal family. The King would never normally abdicate, and I understand that. That is the history of this country and the nature of the institution. But we live in a different era, don't we, where whether it's a corporation or a government figure, the boss will fall if there's been misdemeanors under them. And the issue we've got with this story, and why I think it's so potentially devastating, is that Charles may not be able to plead ignorance on this. And that's why it can't be guaranteed that he dies on the throne.
You have to have some sympathy for Charles. He's served the longest apprenticeship in royal history. Finally, at his age, becomes king. Then is stricken down with cancer.
Yeah.
He's had that for 2 years.
His son does a runner to California.
Yeah, and now this. I mean, it's not been a great start for him, and he's got more worries on his shoulders. Of course, the royal family, we have to say, is a symbol of stability and unity for this country. The options of an alternative are, a political president. So, but nevertheless, while this is going on, the minority of people who are Republicans and the hard left in politics will be making a lot of noise, which is why I think there's a movement to try and remove Andrew from the line of succession, because they need to distance themselves and cut him off completely.
Most definitely. There can't be too much more that you can do with Andrew other than incarcerate him, and that's a matter for the courts, not for the family itself. What is given the fact that you've at close quarters reported on public figures for the vast majority of your career, David, politicians, celebrities, you've exposed all of them. What do you think happened to Charles in regard to this story, this unexploded bomb of his younger brother? Are we looking at naivety potentially on the part of the King as this played out? Are we looking at incompetence or a misguided loyalty to his younger brother?
Well, it's difficult to say. I would suspect Andrew was a bit of a law unto himself in a way. It's also reported today that some members of his entourage were aware of what was going on, and of course they will all be interviewed as part of this investigation, no doubt. I mean, how much did they... There's one story that bodyguards, royal bodyguards, were used to protect Epstein at some stage, because there was a meeting inside on premises, and the royal bodyguards were outside.
The allegation, that's right.
Yeah.
The taxpayer-funded royal bodyguards, armed cops, serving the British state, guarding a man that has turned out to be a disgraced paedophile.
Absolutely. So it gets really deep. And how could he get away with this without the senior members of the royal family knowing about it? That's the question. And it's always shrouded in mystique, the royal family. We don't know how much the Queen knows about what's going on, or the King knows about what other members of the royal family do. Does she have her finger on the pulse of the large size of the large family? Or there's all these officials as well. Often, I guess there's a story in the Sun this morning, the Sun on Sunday, saying that Andrew, when he was kicked out of the Royal Lodge, says, why are you doing this to me? I'm the second son of the Queen, don't you know? And this self-delusional grandeur that he had, perhaps is something that the people around him didn't want to challenge him over.
What a thrill to have David Wooding in the studio here in the News UK building in central London. Of course, one of the most respected former newspaper editors of his generation, and now columnist and leader writer at the Sun newspaper. We've got more to come. Before 10 o'clock, we've got an 11th hour booking, and I'm very excited. The man that was the butler to the King joins us live before 10. That's going to be unmissable. But breaking this morning, Nigel Farage stranded in the ocean as his efforts to bring aid and medical supplies to the 4 protesters on the Chagos Islands are thwarted. Bring back the Nigel One. We're going to cover that story next.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
What about Reform UK? That was a topic of today's Dolan's Dispatch. Is it Britain's only hope now? Here is lovely Anna on a voice note.
Morning, Mark, Anna. Sorry, this is a message for Andy and Peter. Guys, I'm a really nice, lovely person who's normally quite peaceful, but I don't think you two, you need to get out of Islington. You need to get off your green pages. People like me, millions and millions of us, have had enough. If Nigel Farage does not step into number 10, people like me are going to take to the streets, and you are going to have a civil uprising, because people like myself, I will not tolerate any more Tory, any more Labour, and any more Green, any more immigration. And I am sick of sitting in a freezing cold house despite working a 70-hour week, where my taxes go to pay for the fleckless and the illegals sitting in 4-star hotels warmer than my own home. That's why Nigel needs to get in. It's for the good of the country, because otherwise we do go to war.
Wow, powerful words. Anna, thank you for that. And what about Gordon Brown calling out Andrew Mountbatten Windsor? Here is Pete.
Good morning, Mark. I think what needs to happen now is Mr. Brown needs to be looked into as well, because don't forget, he ended up selling our gold reserve off on the cheap, using our taxpayers' money to bail out rich bankers, which we never ever got back, and whatever else was going on at that time. These people can't be allowed to get away with this scot-free. And also, if King Charles knew about his brother, he should just come out and say. He probably warned him, and probably Andrew never took any notice of him, because I understand that man doesn't take any notice of anybody at any time. As for Andrew being a brand, he was never a brand. Never has been, never will be. What about Fergie? Why hasn't Fergie been questioned? Because as I understand it, it was Fergie that introduced Andrew to Epstein in the first place. What was going on there? More to this than meets the eye, an awful lot of more this to his eye. Good morning.
Ain't that the truth? Pete, thank you for another brilliant voice note. With me in the studio, the former editor of the Sunday Express, now journalist and leader writer at the Sun newspaper, David Wooding. David, it's time to free the Farage one. The Reform UK leader, Nigel Farage, he's on a boat. He's trying to get to the Chagos Islands, where there are currently 4 protesters there, British Chagosians, returning to their home turf, including the acting First Minister, who we spoke to on Talk Breakfast this week. Farage has been thwarted in his efforts to get onto British territory, and he's making the most of it.
Absolutely, yeah. He's gone out there to on a humanitarian mission, he says, for 4 people who have gone onto this island called Ile du Coin, apparently. And
it's one of the Chagos Islands. It's uninhabited.
Uninhabited, yes. And he's going to try to make this 24-hour journey. I think it's 150 nautical miles from the Maldives across to the with medical aid and food aid for these people. But of course, the British government are saying that he can't go there because he needs. There are threats. There are mechanical problems. And the big stumbling block is that he has to have a trained crew on board. And of course, in that part of the world, it's very difficult to get a fully trained crew. So he's saying that the British state is throwing everything at it to stop him. Of course, he's out there on a good publicity stunt.
It's going to make a few headlines.
Try and undermine it, yes. And he's a nice little trip to the Maldives as well. I'm sure it'd be unloosening his tie and then a few buttons at the top. But yes, this is also bringing into the limelight yet again the Chagos shambles, which will cost Britain, the surrender of the Chagos Islands will cost Britain £35 billion. We're giving them back, and then we're being charged £35 billion to use Diego Garcia, one of the islands, to have an airbase there. Of course, President Trump has now fallen out with us over that because, of course, it's a problem for the US airbase too.
Indeed, 30 billion. Now, I know that will be paid over 100 years, but that figure, 35 billion, that is a third of the cost of servicing government debt at the moment. It would pay for our defence budget for half a year. So it's a lot of money. And
at a time when we keep being told that we have to increase our defence spending to 5% of GDP in order to counter the threat from Russia to the rest of Europe. And we don't know yet where we're going to get this money from.
Is there a counter-argument to the Chagos situation that it's legally complex and that our return of this territory is inevitable? Because I've certainly had voices on the show over the last couple of days across the political spectrum, some of whom are agreed that actually our holding on to the Chagos Islands is a non-starter. What do you think?
Well, John Healey said this, the Defence Secretary, some time ago, but it's been revealed in government papers in the last 24 hours that's not the case. There is no legal reason why we have to surrender it. So that's now, some of the Conservatives are now saying, did the Defence Secretary mislead Parliament in saying that? So this is another problem for the government. Of course, we've also got today the Shadow Foreign Secretary, Dame Priti Patel, has flown out to Washington to stir it up. She's going there to meet members of the regime. The regime sounds a bit strong. The administration, the Trump administration, to say we've got to stop this from going through. And Trump is currently against it himself, particularly wound up by the fact that Keir Starmer has refused to allow him to use British air bases, one at RAF Fairford, the other one at Diego Garcia, if he launches any strikes on Iran.
Why do you think the Prime Minister is so willing to die on this hill of Chagos?
I don't know. There's real questions to be asked on this. His friend, his human rights lawyer friend, Lord Hermer, the Attorney General, is really passionate about doing this as well, as is his foreign policy advisor. And I just wonder what is in it for them. It's just bizarre. And lots of questions are being asked on this one.
The politics of this are coming to the fore as well, notwithstanding his ambitions to do it. And I suspect it might be some effort at claiming a legacy as Prime Minister. Maybe Starmer knows he won't be in for long. I think that's why he introduced ID cards abortively, is I think he thinks to himself, I might get 18 months, 2 years. I need to show something for it, my time in power. Maybe Chagos is part of that. Who knows? We're not mind readers, are we? But does Chagos become so politically problematic for the PM that it's the U-turn number 15, 16 or 17, do you think?
Depending on how many U-turns you've totted up already. It could be, and certainly maybe a forced U-turn because it cannot proceed without the US backing. So it's if you were a betting man, you would put your money on him being driven back on this one.
You think there's a solid chance that the Chagos surrender will not happen? That is fascinating. David, next up, and this is an extraordinary story. It's not political, but I think it's important to discuss. An award-winning police detective who was one of the first on scene at the London Bridge terror attacks, which saw 8 people murdered and over 40 people badly injured. This guy is sacked for joking about travellers on WhatsApp. Now, he used the P word in relation to travellers, which is an offensive slur. I don't think it's language that you or I are in any mood to defend. But what we've got here is a brave man who saved lives, who said something politically incorrect in a private WhatsApp group. What's your reaction to this?
It brings it home to me again. I've seen this so many times that what you write in an email or in a WhatsApp or a text message, if you're in any position of employment for that matter, it could come back to haunt you. Nothing is private in the world these days. And he's sent what he thought was a jokey message to some colleagues, and it has now emerged. And he's in trouble. I mean, one of the ones that we can repeat is, was this a raffle on a certain kind of site? Lots of mobile type homes. I mean, that's only the start of it, and then he starts using more derogatory language. And he may have regarded this as just a joke among police officers, but of course the police forces are trying to prove that they are not racist, not bigoted, and that they treat everybody equally, and that flies in the face of it. So, it's a very stupid mistake to make.
It is a stupid mistake to make, and you're so right. And there, but for the grace of God, go I in any messages that you have sent or will send in the future. What I would say is, surely the compromise is a conversation with his line manager.
Yeah, absolutely.
Because this is not the most wildly egregious offence of all time. And there might be context and mitigating factors such as his courage. Well, this is a man that jumps into a cop car and zooms toward danger at speed. Right, he gets a message on his radio, there's a terrorist, 8 people are dead, off you go. I just wonder whether there's enough in the bank for this guy, for the line manager to go, look, this is not language that's acceptable. I'd like you to apologise, maybe even do a course, whatever. But for him to lose his career, I'm not so sure.
That's perfectly reasonable viewpoint, and there will be lots of people who have sympathy for Mark Luker on this one. The big question I would ask is, why did the WhatsApp messages need to be made public? If the senior officer had spotted these up for some reason, and goodness knows why they were looking at them, I suspect somebody who was on the receiving end of one of these messages passed it on, had an axe to grind. How did it become public? Why didn't they just deal with it internally?
And that is the other issue, is you're right, don't be naive. Anything you tweet or message can go public, sure, but it was a private message and is very different to somebody that goes on X, like Lucy Connolly, for example, whereby she's paid the price for a very public pronouncement. She's literally published her views. I mean, I think that treatment was disproportionate too, but it's more of a solid case against her that she goes on X. This guy messaging his mates, and you know as well as I do, I mean, you've come from smoky newsrooms in Fleet Street. Look at the military, look at cops, they've got hard lives. They face danger every day, and sometimes the humour and the banter and the language is edgy.
This is what Mark Luker says in his defence, was that, I've struggled to get myself back on an even keel after the experiences of London Bridge, and the only way to keep yourself sane is through humour. And that was part and parcel. That was his defence.
I mean, it might have been remarks about women and that sort of thing, which again I wouldn't defend, but it's complex, isn't it?
But there's this thing called disclosure now, which we should all bear in mind. You think all your emails and your texts are private, but under the law, you have the lawyers in any action can demand and get your emails and text messages.
Very true. David, I've been through your phone and I've got to say, I mean, the blood drained from my face. Can I just say this man is as pure as a driven snow? That's why you're a secret truth and justice, because you're above reproach. David, before I let you go, a couple of seconds if you can. Wow. A bit of a soap opera going on within the Labour Party. Health Secretary and the Prime Minister. What's going on?
Well, Wes Streeting, there's a rumour flying around that Wes Streeting is going to be fired by the Prime Minister for plotting to take his job. Now, Downing Street deny this, say it's nonsense. However, the suggestion is that he will wait until after either losing Gorton and Denton on Thursday. It's only a few days off, Mark. If they lose that badly, then he might be the fall guy for that, or he might get rid of him in May when that's all over. But the problem then is all he does is let him free from his cabinet responsibilities and his being part of the team to be a loose cannon who would then possibly mount a leadership battle.
My thanks to a legend of Fleet Street, of course, writing for the Sun newspaper now, David Wooding, former editor of the Sunday Express. David, good luck with the paper today. Can't wait to read your stuff. Always fascinating. Folks, so much more to come. The King, is he on borrowed time? This is Talk Breakfast.
Breaking news in the last couple of moments. Extraordinary news. The police have arrested Andrew Mountbatten Windsor. It's his 66th birthday today. What a birthday present that is.
Mr. Mandarin, how long do you think that you can stay on the island?
We're going to stay forever. Our rights have to be respected now. We're going to stay.
Do you expect Jeremy Clarkson to become a part of your new party?
I can tell you, if Jeremy Clarkson decided to darken my doorstep, I would be absolutely delighted.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
A huge royal development courtesy of the Mail on Sunday. Email proves King Charles was warned about his brother's secret deals. King Charles was warned as long ago as 2019 that the royal family's name was being abused by Andrew Mountbatten Windsor's business associations, according to the Mail on Sunday. Let's get reaction now from a man who knows the workings of the royal family intimately well, the former royal butler, Grant Harold. Good morning, Grant.
Good morning.
Grant, I know you've got the highest regard for King Charles, and I have high regard for him as well. But this is a headache for our monarch, is it not?
Oh, completely. I mean, the fact that apparently these emails exist and kind of show that he knows about it. On one hand, of course, it shocks me like everyone else, but on the other hand, it doesn't, because I think with family members, and tell me if I'm wrong, Matt, I think with family members, we're aware if some of them have got skeletons or in their cupboard, or maybe things aren't quite, kind of right. It's families, you're aware of these kind of things. But again, as we've said the whole way along, innocent until proven guilty. And so the king would also be kind of taking that in mind, that back all those years ago, he maybe wouldn't want to kind of get ahead of himself. But as it's become more transparent that things aren't adding up, that's when we've seen him take these precautions by removing the titles, get them to move out of his home, and basically distance himself very much as things have escalated. So it's a bit of a kind of, I suppose, if you look back, several years ago, it wasn't quite like this.
Exactly
so maybe,
right. I mean, the world has changed, Grant, hasn't it, since the 1950s and 60s, reverence towards the royal institutions. We now live in a culture which is, I suppose, more political, Grant, where the boss is accountable for the actions of someone under them. The boss, the CEO, on this occasion, being the king.
Absolutely. And as you said, in the 1950s and 40s, you would never question the monarchy. In fact, if you question the monarchy, you can find yourself in a bit of trouble. Even, dare I say, 20 years ago, when now it's changed. I mean, they are accountable, and we're all aware, Mark, that the monarchy popularity has certainly dropped since the death of the late Queen. The recent poll that's been done about Prince Andrew being removed from the line of succession, where a majority of people don't want him in the line of succession. There's a lot of strong feeling, can I say, against the monarchy at this moment in time. And the king will be aware of that. So these emails that have now come out today only adds to the weight where people are probably going to be questioning, the point of the monarchy, and and kind of starting to think of what's the alternatives, which is not what the king would be wanting to, people to be, he want people to be grateful and thinking how wonderful it is to have a royal family, not questioning, why we've got it and all the problems that come along with it.
What do we know of Charles's relationship with Andrew over the years, Grant? Do they get on, the two men? Before all of this scandal, do they have chemistry? Were they pals, or was there always a problem?
I mean, from my point of view, Mark, I didn't ever see a huge amount of Andrew.
Lucky you.
If I'm being completely honest, I only saw him a few times. Now, it doesn't mean to say that his brother, they didn't speak on the phone, or they didn't have, because I wasn't always there. That's, I can't say for certainty. But I think from my experiences, I'd said the king was certainly closer to his sister, Princess Anne. And also they live, where I live, they're actually I'm kind of between the two of them by a few miles. So they are, neighbours, and they are friends. I think with these brothers, and Edward as well, I wouldn't say they're not close. They just probably don't have as much contact as he would with his sister, say. But as far as Andrew went, I didn't really see, if that gives you an indication, I didn't really see much of him at all.
No, Charles and Anne seem to be similar in character, quite diligent, quite austere, very focused on the job, sensible people, maybe like their mother.
Absolutely. Their characters are very similar. I always thought that Princess Anne very much reminded me of her father, and the king, interestingly, probably a little bit more of his mother. But when it came down to, and even Edward, of his mother, but when it came to Andrew, I don't really know which character you could actually describe him as. He was always quite there's more and more coming out, isn't there? There's even private detectives and things kind of giving views and talking about him. And unfortunately, I think what is coming out, and I was aware of that even before I joined the royal household, that he was never hugely popular, if I can say that, certainly around the staff.
But this must be difficult for you to see so many negative headlines around a family and an institution of which you're very fond and which you served for many years, Grant. Your book, which is a bestseller, is called The Royal Butler, My Remarkable Life of Royal Service. This is just painful to watch, isn't it?
It is, Mark. I've got a respect for the royal family. It was a childhood ambition to work for them. I idolised them. I really wanted to meet Queen Elizabeth. And as you know, these are all, if I can say, dreams that all came true. And when you work for them, it'd be wrong of me to say that they're perfect. Nobody's perfect. We all have flaws. Everybody's got flaws. We're human. We make mistakes. But when I was there was nothing quite like this going on. So to kind of now witness what's happening at this present time is unbelievable. And the only thing I would say is I'm kind of glad that the Queen's not around to see, whether she knew or not, to see what's happening with public opinion and the kind of what's all taking place and, you know, with Andrew getting arrested, I don't know if the Queen, honestly don't know how the Queen would have coped with it.
No, it's unimaginable, particularly given that she was older and faced health battles. You really wouldn't want to have added that to her burden. You mentioned that you served as the royal butler at a happier time for the institution. What do you think your former colleagues are going through now as they serve the King, as they serve other members of the royal family within the household? What do you think life is like in the palace at the moment?
I think it's going to be I think everyone's going to be on edge, to be completely truthful. And I'm wondering if the police with the investigation are going to be interviewing members of the household. And that's going to be interesting because, and without breaking confidence, I'm aware of what one or two of them has said to me over the years. And if they get interviewed, I'm wondering what will be said. You know, so I think there's going to be a lot of uneasiness about it. You know, it's now that, you know, thing where everyone's going to be thinking, am I going to be interviewed? Am I going to be questioned? And let's be realistic, some people will worry because, you know, there's certain people have been there for many, many years, and what they won't want to do is to jeopardise their jobs or cause any kind of upset, you know, for the family. But at the same time, you can guarantee the King will want to get to the bottom of this, and he'll probably be encouraging them, you know, if they get interviewed, to make sure that they tell the truth.
I want to stay on this story. Grant Harold, thank you so much for your valuable time. We love having you on the show, the royal butler, my remarkable